Chapter 1272. Tu Hai's words were naturally to vent the anger in his heart, as well as to speak up for Su Kuda. After all, he was now the favorite of the military chief, with a lot of power and autonomy. Who knew if Bai Shuang would still be the same after he took over? Would he find a chance to get rid of Tu Hai himself and replace him with someone else? This wasn't Tu Hai measuring the stature of a gentleman with his own yardstick. This kind of thing could be said to be the norm. In order to better control the army, most military chiefs wouldn't allow their subordinates to have different opinions. Otherwise, if they really fought a war, how could they unify the command? But no matter what Tu Hai was thinking, Su Kuda's demotion from commander to regiment commander was already set in stone. Unless Yang Chendong retracted it, no one could change it. For example, Su Kuda now accepted this fact. He was now thinking about how to fight his last battle as a commander. At the very least, he couldn't leave this mess in the hands of his successor, Bai Shuang. Commander 2, what's the situation at the front? Su Kuda ignored Tu Hai's complaints and went straight to the heart of the matter. Military chief. When it came to serious matters, Tu Hai didn't dare to be the slightest bit arrogant. He hurriedly replied, right now, the 304th Division is at the front. Commander Kang Biao is personally commanding the formation, but I heard that they also suffered some losses. The Walla cavalry seems to have gone crazy, charging non-stop. They are also using the tip of the arrow formation. If it wasn't for the heavy snow affecting their speed, I'm afraid our losses would be even greater. This wasn't the first time Su Kuda had heard such a report. Previously, the 302 ND Division's commander Luan Xiaojiang and the 303 RD Division's commander Sensei Naganabu had both reported to him that the Walla army's attacks were extremely fierce. There were a few times when they almost tore a hole in the front line. The various divisions had also suffered heavy losses. From the looks of it, the Walla army had truly risked their lives this time. It was likely that the First Army alone would not be able to keep them here. Thinking of what Yang Chendong had said in the telegram, deal with the situation as you see fit, Su Kaida couldn't help but let out a long sigh. Pass down the order. Tell all divisions to do their best to resist. If they really can't, don't fight them head-on. Let them pass and wait with the new army and other forces to surround the 50,000 Walla army cavalry. Su Kuda finally gave the order, but when Tu Hai heard it, he said with a face full of dissatisfaction, "Why should we? All right, Commander 2, the facts have proven that we can't stop the Walla army from breaking out of the encirclement. Do you really want the first army of the non-human kind to be wiped out?" Anger finally appeared on Su Kuda's face. Although he was unwilling, he knew that the bigger picture was more important. He also knew that if he didn't act this way, Tu Hai would continue to persuade him, and he was afraid that he would change his mind. Seeing that Su Kuda was truly angry, Tu Hai didn't dare to say anything more. He could only stand at attention and salute, then find someone to pass down the order. The resistance of the First Army of the non-human kind became much weaker because of this order. When the news reached Bo Muir's ears, he let out a long sigh. Very good. In less than 2 hours, the sky will be completely dark. The leader will arrive at any time. Send out scouts. Once the leader arrives, immediately guide him to meet up with us. Then, send out the 5,000 death squads to open a path of blood and prepare for the leader's departure. The sky wasn't dark yet, and the wind was even more chilly. However, no one seemed to feel it. Instead, they all stared with wide eyes, waiting for the arrival of the final battle. Finally, after nearly 2 hours, the scouts came back with news. They had already received the leader Yeshen from Turpan. Not only that, General Chao Lu had also arrived with 20,000 cavalry. When he heard that his side had an additional 35,000 cavalry, Bo Muir suddenly had a bold idea. They currently had the advantage in numbers, and the 5th Star Army's 30,000 cavalry reinforcements would only arrive a day later. Then, could they use this opportunity to do something? For example, surround the 5th Star Army and eliminate them? When this idea appeared in Bo Muir's mind, he felt a surge of blood. When the Deputy General asked him if he should send the 5,000 death squads to the battlefield, he didn't immediately reply. General? Seeing that Bo Muir was silent for a long time, the Deputy General couldn't help but call out twice. afraid that he would miss the opportunity to break out of the encirclement. Oh, send them out. Muir's thoughts came back, and he finally gave up on the idea of surrounding the Fifth Star Army. Although this plan was indeed very tempting, the strength of the Fifth Star Army wasn't to be underestimated. He couldn't guarantee that they would be able to eliminate the 80,000 Fifth Star Army in a day's time. If they couldn't, once they were entangled, once the Fifth Star Army's reinforcements arrived, it would be difficult to escape. And even if they could defeat the Fifth Star Army, the Wala army would suffer heavy losses. This wasn't a good deal at all. What they wanted now wasn't to eliminate the Fifth Star Army, because they simply couldn't do it. What they wanted was to get away from here. Only in this way could they better develop themselves. This required them to bring out enough elite cavalry to be the cornerstone of their future development. If one more person died here, it would be a huge loss to their future. Putting away the unrealistic thoughts in their hearts, the 5,000 Wala cavalry charged out. They all had the thought of death on their faces as they rode forward with difficulty in the dark night. From time to time, they would wave their swords to block the incoming arrows. Although their speed wasn't fast and they suffered heavy losses, no one retreated. The first army of the outsiders had been fighting for half a day. Seeing another Wala cavalry brigade appear, and not only did they not dodge the arrows, they even dared to shoot back at them. Both sides suffered some losses in a short period of time. They aren't human at all, they aren't afraid of death. Commander Kong Biao of 304 saw the Wala cavalry getting closer and closer and couldn't help but sigh. He had to admit that among the opponents of the Fifth Star Army, the Wala cavalry's combat strength had always been superior. Many times, the Fifth Star Army had to be very careful when fighting against them, otherwise, they would likely suffer heavy losses. Come, report the situation to the commander. Seeing that the Wala cavalry was getting closer and closer, the shooting would soon turn into a close combat. Kong Biao quickly ordered people to ask for instructions. Should they really fight with them regardless of the losses, or should they open a path for them to pass through? In just a few minutes, the order was passed down. They opened a path for the Wala cavalry to charge through. Obviously, Su Kuda gave up on the idea of both sides suffering heavy losses. He avoided the spearhead and looked for an opportunity to wipe out a portion of the enemy. For some reason, Commander Kong Biao, who received this order, actually felt relieved. He wasn't someone who was afraid of death, but he felt that this kind of fighting method was meaningless. There wouldn't be a true winner in this kind of war, and it would only benefit a third party in the end. The first army of the foreign races finally opened a path for the Wala cavalry to pass through. When the news came, Muir had just met up with Yes Hen and the others. He was overjoyed and took advantage of the cover of the night to rush through the opening. During this process, whether it was Yes Hen or Muir, they didn't mention Tai Chin. It was as if they had forgotten about this person and his 50,000 Wala cavalry. Speaking of which, it wasn't that they were careless or that they really forgot. It was because they knew that there would always be someone left behind to deal with the 5-star army. If they all wanted to retreat, once the 5-star army met up, they would be able to chase after them. This would create more variables for them to escape. As a result, when a large number of cavalrymen escaped through the gap that the First Army had purposely opened, General Tikian and his nearly 50,000 cavalrymen became miserable. They became children that no one wanted, lone wolves on the grassland. The Wala army's main force escaped without notifying Tai Chin. This news was discovered by the First Army of the foreign races in time. They immediately used the radio to inform the new army and other departments. Su He and the others who received the news were all confused. The Far Eastern Army's 1st Cavalry Division's commander, Daikwa, said something that made everyone very alert. Could it be that the Wala army did this on purpose, leaving them to wait for us to surround them and attack them from behind? That's not possible. Hearing this, the other military commanders all had a look of panic and didn't know what to do. Instead, Bai Shuang's eyes quickly spun a few times and suddenly said with some joy, "Maybe the Wala army is cutting off their tail to survive. They are afraid that we will not let them go, so they intentionally left behind 50,000 cavalry to restrain us." But that's 50,000 cavalry. Is Yes Hen really willing to let them go? Su He was somewhat convinced, but also somewhat doubtful. Teacher once said that Yes Hen is an ambitious and ruthless person. This kind of person is willing to sacrifice anyone for his own safety. 50,000 cavalry is very strong, but compared to Yeshen's life, what is it? How about this? I suggest that we join forces with the first army to surround the 5-star army. However, we don't need to take the initiative to attack. Instead, we can rely on the thick snow to fire arrows from afar and restrain them here. This way, if Yes Hen wants to surround us, we will have the advantage of the terrain and sufficient energy to deal with him. At the same time, we can use the smallest price to persuade the 50,000 Walla cavalry to surrender. Bai Shuang's thoughts turned quickly. At this moment he had become the commander of an army, so he didn't consider the small matters in front of him, but the big picture. Chapter 1273. Hearing this suggestion, Su He's eyes also brightened. Good idea. We encircle but don't attack. Once they want to fight back, we are not unprepared. We can only encircle and use bows and arrows to deal with 50,000 cavalrymen from afar. We can achieve the greatest victory with the least cost. I agree. Even Su He agreed, and several other military officers expressed their opinions one after another, expressing their agreement. A telegram was then sent to Su Ku. Su Ku was originally rejoicing because the Walla cavalry that escaped through the gap he opened was not 50,000 like the telegram said, but 70,000. The sudden appearance of Chao Lu's 20,000 cavalry was something no one expected. Facing so many cavalry, if the first army desperately tried to stop them, they would be in danger of being completely annihilated. In order to save himself, the first army would certainly launch a fierce attack with all their might. In that case, not only the first army of the non-human kind, even the first army of the non-human kind wouldn't be able to defeat a few of them. Yang Chendong had probably thought of this result, which was why he said to deal with it at his discretion. While his heart was palpitating, he received Su He's telegram. He immediately tightened his pockets and quickly approached the 50,000 Walla army. In less than 2 hours, he had completely surrounded them. At this time, Pai Qin also received news that the Walla's main force had retreated. In his tent, he immediately fainted in anger. After a group of subordinates rescued him, he slowly woke up and cursed, "Bo Muir, you're too weak." Then he fainted again. When Pai Qin woke up for the third time, the 5-star army had completely surrounded him. Pai Qin's face was pale and he didn't speak. His eyes were empty as he looked forward, as if he had nothing left to live for. He had thought that Bo Muir valued him very much. Not only did he not care that he had been defeated in the previous battle, but he had also taken the initiative to give him 50,000 cavalrymen. This made him feel that he had great power in his hands and was looking down on the world. But who would have thought that in less than a day he would become an abandoned pawn? At this moment he finally understood why he was given 50,000 men. It was to lower his guard, and at the same time, it was also a gift to the 5-star army. It was to make them focus on him and not move away. That's right. 50,000 cavalrymen. How tempting. Thinking about the number of troops in his hands, he felt a burst of comical feeling. But on the other hand, if it wasn't for the fact that he had left behind so many soldiers for him, why would he be willing to risk his life here? Even when the sky had turned dark, he didn't rush Bo Muir, but instead kept waiting. Wasn't it because he was confident that someone would abandon him and his 50,000 cavalrymen? But now, it seemed that he was wrong, completely wrong. Now that he had 50,000 soldiers in his hands, he did not have the slightest bit of fighting spirit. He was already someone who had been abandoned. Even if he won the battle, who would see it for? As for declaring himself king, did he think that the 5-star army around him were incompetent? Thinking about the problem of food, he quivered and asked the personal guard beside him, "How much provisions do we have in our army?" "General, this time we came out in a hurry. Previously, General Bo Muir had said that we would retreat at night, so we didn't bring too much provisions. We only have 2 days' worth of provisions." When the personal guard answered this question, his gaze was somewhat evasive. Clearly, he had also thought of a certain possibility. What? Only 2 days? Hearing this result, Pai Qin immediately felt his vision go black, and he fainted again. The 5-star army surrounding them did not know that he had fainted a few times. At this moment, they were setting up an encirclement to prevent the 50,000 Walla cavalrymen from escaping. At this moment, the army urgently rushed to set up barricades. All the caltrops in the army were scattered all over the ground. Strong bows were in hand, and the quiver was full of arrows. They were just waiting to close the door and beat the dogs. According to the analysis of Bai Shuang and the others, the Walla cavalrymen who knew everything would most likely launch a counterattack that night. It would be best if they took action before the 5-star army's encirclement was completely solid. This way, the chances of them escaping would be higher. But they never expected that the night would be peaceful. The next morning, the Walla army was still as calm as usual. It was as if they did not know that they were surrounded. Such an abnormality made Su He, Bai Shuang, and Su Ku confused. They could either break out of the encirclement or surrender. But what did they mean by doing nothing? If it wasn't for the scouts using high-powered military binoculars that allowed them to see countless Walla soldiers moving around inside the tent, and if it wasn't for the scouts who reported that the other party had indeed fled far away and was running all the way, it didn't seem like they were going to come back for a surprise attack. Everyone couldn't help but wonder if they had surrounded an empty tent. Since the Walla army was not moving, the 5-star army had no reason to move. They only needed to continue waiting. When night fell, Narasong and the 30,000 cavalrymen would arrive. This way, even if the enemy had any ideas, they would be able to deal with them calmly. Unexpectedly, the 50,000 Walla cavalrymen did not move. It was as if they did not know that they were heavily surrounded. In reality, he was already lying on the bed. After being angered to the point of fainting, he was in a deep sleep. Since their commander was not awake, the remaining generals did not know what to do. Soon, there were two different opinions among them. The first was the surrender faction. They believed that the situation had changed, and even their leader didn't want them anymore. Whatever they did now couldn't be considered a betrayal. There were many foreign races and surrendered troops in the 5-star army, but weren't they doing well? The second was the fight-to-the-death faction. A man would rather die standing than live kneeling. The only one who died was them. Besides, if the 50,000 cavalrymen charged in the same direction, they would have a chance of survival if they were lucky. However, these two factions did not give way to each other. The surrender faction was waiting for Narasong to wake up. The fight-to-the-death faction considered that they did not have enough manpower. Rushing out like this was no different from courting death. They were also waiting for their commander to wake up and give them orders. In the blink of an eye, 2 days had passed. Narasong's condition did not improve. He was still in a coma and had a high fever. More importantly, the food brought by the army was about to be used up. Apart from a few generals, many soldiers had begun to rely on the snow to fill their stomachs. If this continued, their combat strength would only decrease. However, they did not think of counterattacking when they were in a good condition. Now, they did not have the ability to do so. The 50,000 Walla cavalrymen persisted like this. However, under the encirclement, their every move was under the surveillance of the 5-star army. Especially when they saw that they were so hungry that they had to rely on the snow to survive, the 5-star army also gave up on the offensive strategy that they were halfway through researching. From the looks of it, they could completely trap the enemy. Since that was the case, why bother to attack? Using this time, the 5-star army also rested. Unless they sent out the necessary defensive troops, they also began to hand over the necessary handover. Just like the handover between Su Kuda and Bai Shuang, a commander was directly demoted to a regiment commander. Although it was said that he was going to enter the illustrious 1st Cavalry Division, it was still unpleasant to the ears. Thus, Su Kuda only gave Bai Shuang all the relevant personnel information and the general situation of the army before leaving. Bai Shuang was also smart enough not to ask any more questions. He was someone who had gained a huge advantage. Right now, anything he said would only embarrass the other party. For the sake of Su Kuda's face, he kept his mouth shut. He also handed over some information about the situation of the 4th Regiment to the other party and watched as he left. It was rare for the handover to be so sloppy, but none of the insiders said anything. After Bai Shuang received the information and appointment, he went to the foreign race's first army and met with Tu Hai and the other 3 division commanders. In comparison, Bai Shuang was the youngest. If he had never trained in the army, it would be difficult for him to convince the others even if he had a strong backer. In fact, Tu Hai and the other 3 division commanders were already prepared to take Bai Shuang down a notch. They were already division commanders, but now they actually wanted a regiment commander to lead them. It was impossible to say that they did not have any resistance. However, what surprised everyone was that when Bai Shuang met with the 4 division commanders for the first time, he only used a short sentence to end everything. In my hand is a telegram personally issued by teacher. This cannot be changed. If anyone is still unconvinced, you can argue with me. You can also apply to leave the foreign race's first army. However, if you still want to stay here, then shut your mouths and perform well. If any of you have any problems, don't blame this commander for not showing mercy. Of course, if your abilities are not bad and you have made contributions, this commander will still be fair in his rewards and punishments. Alright, all of you are dismissed. In the future, use your actions to prove yourselves. This was the first time they had met, and this short sentence left Tu Hai and the others at a loss. They originally prepared some questions, but they were unable to voice them. Didn't Bai Shuang already say that? If you argue with me, then you are applying to leave your current post. Thus, he will grant you your wish. The newly appointed commander would definitely receive Yang Chendong's support. This was without a doubt. Otherwise, how would they carry out their work? Not to mention, Bai Shuang was Bugnam of Gojoseon's student. In terms of relationship, the division commanders were far from him. They wanted to find trouble with Bai Shuang partly because they wanted to cry out for Su Kuda, and partly because they wanted to intimidate Bai Shuang and let him know that he was not strong enough to lead them. In the future, when there were military operations, they should respect their opinions more. However, Bai Shuang did not buy it at all. In an instant, the 4 division commanders looked at each other, shook their heads, and left the tent silently. This matter quickly spread, and even reached the ears of Yang Chendong, who was in the palace of Turpan City. He immediately smiled and said to Beta Persei beside him, "This student of mine is very opinionated. He can also distinguish between priorities. Not bad, not bad." Chapter 1274. To be able to receive 2 compliments from Yang Chendong, Bai Shuang's identity as the army commander was confirmed. At this moment, Yang Chendong was in a very good mood. After crushing the attack of the 5 countries, the 50,000 Wala army cavalry would be in his pocket again. The next step was to wait for the snow to melt before launching an all-out attack. During this period, there were still many things that he needed to do. For example, continuously sending troops to the Ili region, continuously sending the people who wanted to migrate out, and letting the people from the outside bring them in, settling them down, and dividing the land equally, etc. Considering that there were many things to do, and that the war would start again after the spring, he had to stay here to set up the formation. Yang Chendong did not plan to return to Xichen City. This time, he had to be separated from his wife and children again. Xichen City. Long residence. The chief of public security, Long Tainan, was drawing Yang Duo's eyebrows in his bedroom. No one would have thought that the dignified Chief Long, who could make criminals tremble in fear, had such a gentle side. A man drawing a woman's eyebrows, this was a sign of the love between husband and wife. See Zhang Chang drawing eyebrows. Zhang Chang was from Pingyang during the Han Dynasty. During the Xian Emperor, he was the governor of the capital. Zhang Chang drawing eyebrows for his wife. In the past, it was said that husband and wife had a good relationship. Later generations combined the story of Zhang Chang drawing eyebrows, Han Shou stealing a woman, Xiang Ru stealing a jade, and Xin Yu's thin waist into the 4 great romantic affairs of the ancient times. Yang Duo, who was middle-aged but still had a beautiful face, was also enjoying this feeling at this moment. From time to time, her eyes would meet with Long Tianan's, and then she would smile. In an instant, the temperature of the entire room seemed to rise a lot. Okay, done. After finishing the last stroke, Long Tainan, who was bending over, laughed. Looking carefully in the mirror, Yang Duo's face showed a satisfied expression. Not bad, my husband's skills have improved again. That's true. Who asked me to have a lovely wife? Longtime laughed heartily after being praised. He was obviously very satisfied with this praise. In response, Yang Duo threw a smug expression, but in her heart, she was happy. Longtime was not her first wife, and she had a past that she could not bear to look back on. She originally thought that this was the end of her life, but she never thought that she would be able to have a second spring. Moreover, the relationship between the two of them was really good. They loved and respected each other, which made her very satisfied. It was because of this satisfaction, Yang Duo was willing to do anything for Longtime. Just like how she had sent a telegram to Hu Mang, the commander of the new army in the first city, for the sake of Ai Hui. She didn't know if it was appropriate, but she had done it out of love. Now that she thought about it, she had to inform Longtime. Otherwise, who knew if it would cause any misunderstandings? Husband, I sent a telegram to Commander Hu Meng yesterday. What? Longtime, who was washing his hands after putting down his brush, did not hear clearly at first. He thought that it was just a normal matter, but then he reacted. His hands that were reaching into the basin could not help but pause, and his entire body also froze. Yang Duo, who had been paying attention to Longtime, noticed this change. A look of heartache flashed in her eyes, and then she said, I recommended Director Qin to Commander Tiger Mane. When the content was said, Longtime had already turned around. With a trace of nervousness on his face, he said, Madam, how can you send such a telegram? This, why can't he? What's this? Director Qin is a talent to begin with. Didn't my husband say more than once that once he wants to lead troops into battle, he is also qualified to be a military commander? And I also know that you went to City Lord Yu Qian and Deputy Commander Leng Song of the Army Headquarters because of this matter. I saw that you were anxious, so I wanted to help you. Yang Duo naturally knew what Longtime was going to say. It was nothing more than that. It was best for women not to get involved in this matter, especially Yang Duo, who was Yang Chendong's seventh sister. Sometimes she had to pay special attention to what she said or even what she expressed. How could Yang Duo not know this? A woman's virtue was to have no talent. Wasn't this a sentence that those scholars often said? However, she also knew that they were in Yang Xie's world now. Yang Chendong had said that men and women were equal. Since they were equal, why couldn't she do what men did? More importantly, she saw that Longtime had been busy because of this matter. She really wanted to help. After thinking about it, she simply sent a telegram to Commander Tiger's Mane in her own name. Of course, Yang Duo wasn't someone who didn't know the importance of things, especially now that Yang Xie's territory was getting bigger and bigger. As Yang Chendong's seventh sister, the weight of her words naturally became heavier and heavier. Therefore, she also specially sent a telegram to Yang Chendong, directly removing Longtime from the list. She only said that Qin Feng was a good person and a good seedling to be a general. She recommended him out of fairness. Yang Duo only knew that her husband was anxious because of this matter. As for what would happen after these two telegrams were sent, she didn't care. This was the willfulness of women. It was also the willfulness of Yang Chendong's sister. It must be known that even Yang Chendong's wives wouldn't speak about the appointment of a general because this involved a matter of principle, and that was that the harem couldn't interfere with politics. Yang Duo was Yang Chendong's sister. She wouldn't care about such things. She just did what she thought. What could she do? Longtime was a little speechless by Yang Duo's words. After his expression changed again and again, he finally returned to his previous gentle state and said, Well, since the telegram has already been sent, then it's too late to say anything. It's just that Qin Feng is really a talent. Yes, this is a recommendation. Sixth brother should thank me. Yang Duo raised her head proudly and looked as if she was doing this for the public. Longtime saw this and could only bitterly smile. He knew that Yang Duo was helping him. How could he refute it? Besides, he was also wholeheartedly dedicated to the public. He was really recommending talents. At least as far as he knew, none of the candidates recommended by the military and the city lord's mansion could compare to Qin Feng. Qin Feng, the head of the operations department of the Ministry of Public Security, was a person with great power in the Ministry of Public Security. At the same time, he was also a young talent that Longtime appreciated very much. Despite the Great Migration, the proportion of natives in the land was very small. However, there were still some people who were unwilling to let the country die and did some small things in private. It was just that because the number of people was limited and the scale wasn't very large, it was naturally not good to send the nearby garrison to deal with this kind of movement. Therefore, this kind of thing was put on the Ministry of Public Security. This made them have an extra unit of the operations department in order to deal with these people who were always restless and would even use weapons to resist Yang Xie's forces. When it was first established, Longtime suppressed all the opposing opinions and entrusted Qin Feng, who was only 24 years old, with the heavy responsibility of becoming the head of the operations department. According to the military rank, he was directly given the rank of colonel. Facts also proved that this person didn't disappoint Longtian's expectations. In the past 2 years, dozens of big and small attacks eliminated many opposing forces under Yang Xie's forces, giving the people a stable society and space for development. For this, Qin Feng himself also made a lot of contributions and finally received the rank of colonel. This made him in the limelight in the Ministry of Public Security for a while, and he almost reached the height of Longtime, the chief. However, he was only less than 20 years old. With this kind of contribution, he couldn't be promoted in the Ministry of Public Security anymore. He couldn't give the position of chief to him. Even if he was a talent, because of the environment, he couldn't be promoted anymore. As a result, Qin Feng, who had made great contributions several times in a row, was given the title of Vice Chief of Public Security. This was already the limit. Because of this, in order to not delay this person's development, Longtime decided to send him to the military. This way, there would be room for improvement. This time, it just so happened that the new army was going to be changed into a new army group. Seeing that there were 3 army commander positions, he had an idea. For this matter, Longtime threw away his old face and went to look for City Lord Yu Qian, Deputy Commander Leng Song, and the others. Unfortunately, the effect wasn't very good. This didn't mean that Qin Feng wasn't capable enough or that his contributions weren't enough. It was just that he was still too young. If he was allowed to take the position like this, what would happen to the other senior people? Thus, Longtime only wrote Qin Feng's name in the recommendation letter from the Ministry of Public Security and then prepared to resign himself to fate. However, everyone knew that it was difficult to obtain such an important position just by relying on the recommendation of the Ministry of Public Security. This was where his worry lay. He didn't expect that Yang Duo would see it all. Then she made a move. However, she was afraid that she wouldn't get permission, so she acted first and reported later. Originally, Yang Duo was prepared to tell Yang Chendong in person when he returned to Qian City for the new year. However, there was already news that the war in Qian City was tense and he might not return this new year, so she simply sent a telegram to express her intentions. Yang Duo didn't want her husband to worry too much. In addition, Qin Feng was indeed a talent, so she directly sent 2 telegrams in her own name. When the telegrams were received, Yang Chendong just glanced at them and put them aside. He casually said to Beta Persei, "My 7th sister is even recommending talents. Alright, go and check it out later and see who this Qin Feng is." After receiving the order, Beta Persei immediately nodded and went out to send telegrams to Yang Wu, who was staying in Qian City, and Yang San, who was the director of the security bureau. Since it was something that the young master was concerned about, it was not a small matter. In the beginning city, Tiger's Mane, who also received the telegram, revealed a helpless expression. The establishment of a new army was no longer a secret. With the help of the logistics commander, Yang Si, the soldiers had basically gathered, but the commander had not been completely decided yet. This gave Tiger's Mane, who was about to become the commander, a headache. Chapter 1275. Facing the 3 commanders' positions, The various factions all scrambled to sign up, and there were more than 40 candidates. At this point in time, Xianxia wasn't as weak as before. His territory was enormous, his population was numerous, and his level of wealth had already arrived at a state that no one could compare to. Because of this, many internal factions had appeared. At first, they just wanted to protect their own interests and strengthen themselves. As they won more and more battles, their territories grew bigger and bigger. Conflicts of interests were inevitable. Among them, a few major forces had enough foundation and could influence many decisions and policies without anyone noticing. The most powerful of these factions were the three factions. The first was the elder faction. For example, Tiger's Mane, the Yang family servants, and some important factory managers and founders. Even though there were not many of them, they all occupied important positions. The second was the Cold Front faction. This was the elite of the elite, equipped with the best weapons and the best soldiers. Their strength was unimaginable. The third was the Red Nest faction. They mainly developed in the rear, acting as the main camp and supporting the development of the army. As Xianxia developed, it also developed itself. Most of the time, even Yang Chendong had to consider their feelings when making certain decisions. The fourth was the Surrender faction. There were all kinds of talents among them, but it was undeniable that they had all joined the Yang faction from other factions for various reasons. Many of them had been forced to join, but as time passed, they settled down and became Xianxia, especially the backbone of the 5-star army. There were actually differences among the 4 major factions. For example, the Crimson faction was also divided into the local faction, the old people in Crimson City, the Great Ming faction, the talents from Northern Ming and Southern Ming, and the foreign faction, the talents from outside Crimson City and Great Ming who came to Crimson City to develop. Apart from this, there were also some smaller factions, such as the Grassland faction, the Vietnamese faction, the Laotian faction, the Korean faction, and so on. It could be imagined that in the future, there would be the Japanese faction, the Ili faction, and many other factions. Yang Chendong was naturally aware of this, but in order to maintain a balanced relationship, he would not interfere unless it was too strong and threatened him. Where there were people, there would be jianghu. Where there were benefits, there would be conflicts. This was something that no one could avoid. And with these relationships, it was impossible to be on good terms with all of them, but generally speaking, he had to get along with them. Just this time alone, almost all the major and minor factions had been mobilized for the position of the 3 army commanders. As long as there were such talents, they would constantly recommend them. Those who didn't have such talents were also recommended by the other faculties. They agreed to share the benefits. As the commander of an army, how much influence would he have if he obtained this position? How many officer positions would he be able to arrange? Just thinking about it made people envious. Because of this, Tiger's man had the biggest headache. As the new commander of the army, what he needed to do was not to be impartial. He needed to select the best talents and entrust them with important tasks. He also needed to balance the relationships between all parties. At the very least, he could not allow people to criticize him for any major problems. For a moment he had a headache. But things had to be done. Soon, 2 candidates were submitted. After the review, they were basically approved. They were only waiting for the final order from the army headquarters. They were the 101st Army's commander, Lu Zhua, and the 102nd Army's commander, Ke Lu. Regardless of whether it was in terms of experience or ability, it was obvious to all. If they were promoted, no one would be able to say anything. But no one would have thought that such a problem would still occur. Division Commander Ke Lu was implicated by the new army's commander, Su He. He was given a warning and could not be promoted for half a year. This meant that he would miss this good opportunity. With one less competitor, Tiger's man said that he had one more choice. At this moment, Yang Duo's telegram was delivered to his desk. When this telegram was delivered, there was an attachment. It said that the same telegram was also delivered to Yang Chendong. Tiger's man could not ignore this. Who was Yang Duo? She was the young master's sister. As a servant of the Yang family, she was his master. At the same time, Yang Duo was also the only person from the Yang family that the young master brought to Chichen City. Just based on this relationship, Tiger's man could not ignore it. Not to mention, the matter had already been reported to Yang Chendong. He did not dare to be careless. I have an impression of this Qin Feng. He was the candidate recommended by the Ministry of Public Security. We have also investigated him. He is quite capable, but he is too young. He is not even 27 years old. Tiger's man looked at the telegram and looked at Qin Feng's name. He could not help but say. Of course, he was not talking to himself. He was talking to Yang Si. They were both servants of the Yang family. Their relationship could not be compared to that of ordinary people. In particular, Yang Si was now the commander of the logistics department. In terms of power and the number of management personnel, he was no less than the commander of the first group. Regarding the important matter of selecting a commander, he called Yang Si over to discuss it. Yang Si did not speak at the moment. Instead, he held his chin and looked at Tiger's man as if he was looking at a rare animal. This kind of gaze had a hint of scrutiny, which immediately made the latter raise his eyebrows. I say, why are you looking at me like that? Are you looking for a kick? In the world, other than Yang Chendong, only Tiger's man could say that to someone like Yang Si that he was looking for a kick. They were both servants of the Yang family. Tiger's man could be said to be the boss and the immediate superior of everyone. Of course, he did not really want to kick anyone. It was just a kind of joke to show intimacy. However, there was a certain degree of pressure. At least, Yang Si, who was afraid of being kicked, immediately became serious. Tiger's man, don't talk about age. Young master is not even 30 years old. This sentence was said by Tiger's man. He was stunned. Yes, Yang Chendong was born in 1430. It would be half a month before he turned 30 years old. Looking at the group of servants, they were not old. None of them were over 30 years old. But which one of them did not hold great power? Yes, we shouldn't judge people based on age. But who are we? How can Qin Feng compare to us? Tiger's man was still a little unconvinced. Yes, Qin Feng can't compare to us, but he won't be too far behind. He was recommended by Miss Seven, and this matter has been reported to the young master. I think we should keep this position for now. If my guess is right, it won't be long before the young master receives news. We just have to wait. As for the last commander position, we have to decide quickly. After all, the three armies can't be without a commander for a day. Yang Si was able to become the logistics commander and manage the relationships between all parties very smoothly. He was a person with a clear mind. That was why he had such an analysis. Naturally, whether it was Tiger's man or Yang Si, with their status, they only had one master in their eyes, and that was Yang Chendong. As long as they served the young master well, they did not have to care about other people's opinions. But the problem was that this was recommended by Yang Duo. Even the young master would have some misgivings, so it was not up to them to think too much. Regarding Yang Si's ability, Hu Mang could be considered to be very familiar with it. Hearing him say this, he nodded and said, "Okay, since that's the case, we will leave a position. Now, let's discuss the last commander." At the end of December, 1460 was coming. It was only a few days before the five-star army, and good news came one after another. First, the heavily surrounded 50,000 Walla cavalry finally chose to surrender. Their commander, Taiyin, also died of a serious illness due to his poor health. In the end, his subordinates chose to surrender to the five-star army. To be able to become Walla's elite cavalry, their strength was very good. As long as they changed their mindset, once they joined the five-star army, they would definitely be a group of elite soldiers with decent strength. These people did not need to undergo any systematic training at all. As long as they adapted to the military rules of the five-star army, they would quickly become qualified soldiers. This was equivalent to having an additional 50,000 reserve troops. For the five-star army that entered the Yilabali area, this was a force that could not be ignored. Second, the scouts had sent back accurate information. Under the leadership of Yeshen, 60,000 Walla cavalry crossed the Altai Mountains and entered the northern grasslands. This kind of decision to leave in a hurry already proved that they were afraid of becoming enemies with the five-star army. It was believed that as long as this trend continued, they would not dare to become enemies with the five-star army. This indirectly meant that when the five-star army conquered the Yilabali area, there would be one less strong opponent. Third, the new army would be officially established a few days later on the 1st of January 1460. The commander of the army, Tiger's Mane, had 3 armies and 1 division directly under him. Each division had 4 divisions, each division had 4 regiments, a total of 33,600 people in each army. The army had about 118,000 combat personnel, logistics personnel, and mechanical personnel. Commander Tiger's Mane, 101st Army Commander Lu Zhuo, 102nd Army Commander He Chong, who was selected from countless people. He had served as a squad leader, platoon leader, company commander, battalion commander, and deputy commander in the Cold Vanguard Army. He later served as the deputy chief of staff in the army headquarters, 103rd Army Commander Qin Feng, recommended by Yang Chendong and approved by Yang Chendong, and the new division directly under him, Dengyu. Fourth, the migration of 2 million people from the Xianxia provinces were entering the first city in batches. From there, they would gradually replace the people in the Yilabali area and become the new owners of the area. Everything seemed to be in order. Yang Chendong's territory was Lufan City. Once this area was occupied, it would become the capital. Now, a lot of boulders and cement were being transported to the city. They were just waiting for spring to start building the city. At this moment, Yang Chendong looked like he was going to go to war and would not stop until he occupied this area. This posture also made Yilabali, Turkmenistan, and Yarqiang very nervous. After the five-star army failed twice, the Wala cavalry left and the Kazakh army retreated in fear. At this time, they no longer had any outside help. Chapter 1276. Before this, the 5 countries working together did not cause any problems for the five-star army. Now that there were only 3 countries left, they were even more terrified. Seeing that the five-star army might launch a large-scale attack, after a series of discussions, the 3 kings decided to ask for help from the Kazakh Khanate. Not only that, but they also asked for help from the Aries dynasty. Needless to say, Kazakh was connected to the Ili region, and they were in danger of dying. After the 3 countries promised to provide grain and a certain amount of gold and silver, even if it was for their own safety, they had to send troops once more. The Aries dynasty was the predecessor of Iran. Under the leadership of Wuzong Hasan, they had just defeated the Black Goat dynasty. They were at the peak of their military strength and wanted to expand outwards. The 3 countries took the initiative to ask for help while paying a certain amount of gold and silver. This was what Wuzong Hasan wanted, and they quickly came to a decision to send troops. King Hasan was born in a Turkmen noble family and believed in the Sunnis. He knew the Qur'an and was familiar with Turkic, Persian, and Arabic. He worshipped martial arts and was brave and smart. Since young, he had ambitions that were different from normal people. At this moment, he had just dealt with the Black Goat dynasty, and his strength was at its peak. The number of cavalry under him had reached 300,000. Raising these troops for nothing was a huge financial burden, but he could not find a suitable target to attack all of a sudden. Now that the 3 countries had sent themselves to his door, how could he not take it? Both sides agreed that after the Aries dynasty opened up, they would move towards the 3 countries and work together to fight the five-star army. The year 1460 had finally arrived. During the new year, the various troops gathered here. Yang Chendong drank and chatted with the various generals in the palace. This was a rare gathering. Yang Chendong took the opportunity to adjust the deployment of the army and formulate a military plan for the annexation of Yilianli. This time, the higher-ups of the five-star army who attended the banquet had 5 people. They were the 1st Cavalry Division's Tiger's Man, the new army's commander Su He, Shi Wanshan, the 1st Race's commander Bai Shuang, and the 2nd Race's commander Niu Duo. Apart from that, there was the Mongol Alliance Army's commander Narasong, 30,000 cavalry under him, the 4th Division Lung Feng, the Liaodong 1st Cavalry Division's Dai Kwa, and some other direct regiments. All in all, the five-star army had gathered up to 200,000 troops. This did not include the 150,000 captives from the past few battles and the 100,000 reserve troops sent by Yang Si, the logistics commander of the first city. With these sufficient reserves, no matter which army or division suffered losses in the following battles, they would be able to quickly replenish their losses. This was something that the other powers could not compare to. Not only that, Turpan, Baisbali, and Hoboksari had nearly 2 million civilians from the other provinces of the Yang family. They were waiting for the five-star army to take over the new cities and redistribute the new lands after their victory. Taking advantage of the 3 months of continuous heavy snow, Yang Chendong had made all the preparations. He had also accumulated a large amount of military supplies in the 3 cities. Once they were ready, he would be able to wield his troops and be invincible with just one order. Compared to Yang Chendong's ample preparations, the 3 countries did not surrender without a fight. After failing to send envoys to make peace, they also contacted the Kazakh Khanate and the Aries dynasty respectively. The former decided to send 100,000 troops, while the latter sent 150,000. If one added in the troops of the 3 countries, the total number was close to 1 million. Another huge war was unavoidable. In the banquet, everyone only drank and talked. The atmosphere was not bad. On the second day after the banquet, when everyone arrived at the military conference hall in the palace and saw Jean Xian's sand table in front of them, all the military officers' faces turned solemn. Yang Chendong was still dressed in a clean green robe, holding a thin and sturdy pointer in his hand. Before he even opened his mouth, he had already attracted everyone's attention. Generals, our intelligence department received important news a few days ago. The Ili region, Turpan, and Yarkiang tribes have already secretly asked for help from the Kazakh and Aries dynasty. After paying a certain price, they have already persuaded the 2 countries to send 200,000 cavalry to fight a decisive battle with our 5-star army. Apart from this, the 3 countries have each recruited 50,000 soldiers. If we add it all up, our opponents this time are close to 1 million. Yang Chendong's voice resounded in the conference hall. When the generals heard this, their faces all turned red in excitement. Generals who led soldiers to war were not afraid of battle. The more enemies there were, the more merits there would be, and the more opportunities they would have to show off. Seeing the generals' high fighting spirits, Yang Chendong was also very happy. He had not expected the Aries dynasty to suddenly jump out. His original plan was to head west and fight whatever he saw, but he did not know where to start. Now, the Aries dynasty and the Kazakh Khanate had both taken the initiative to jump out. This was the best thing that could happen. Yang Chendong was very satisfied with the generals' fighting spirit and morale. He raised the pointer in his hand, and the conference hall immediately became quiet again. This time, we only have more than 200,000 soldiers, and we have to face an opponent that is at least 3 times our number. I want to say that everyone must be cautious and not be arrogant and underestimate the enemy. Of course, the fact is not that scary. We have already investigated. After 2 conscriptions, the men of the 3 countries are all gone. In other words, they do not have the ability to conscript again in a short period of time. However, we are different. We have a solid rear. For now, we have more than 200,000 reserve troops. At the same time, there are 100,000 foreign soldiers from various provinces gathering in the logistics headquarters in the beginning city. They will soon set off for us to be our solid backing. Everyone, there is no need to hold back in the next battle. When you see the enemy, just fight. Beat them fiercely until they surrender. Beat them until they are convinced. As for the inevitable sacrifices in the process, I only want to say that no matter how much you lose, you will be replenished. If a battalion is wiped out, you will take another battalion. If a division is wiped out, you will take another division. In short, you can only advance and not retreat. Those who do not listen to military orders and are afraid of the enemy will be dealt with according to military law. Do you understand? Yang Chendong's face was serious, and his eyes flashed with a cold light. The generals of the 5-star army were all veterans. They should not be afraid of the enemy, but they still had to be clear about the rules. Therefore, when Yang Chendong's cold eyes swept across the crowd, everyone raised their heads, puffed out their chests, and answered loudly, "Understood." Very good. The new army will be the vanguard in the middle, the new 5-star army will be the left vanguard, the first outsider army will be the right vanguard, and your third army will be the vanguard. After the battle begins, all of you will be the vanguard. If you see a city, you can go around it and leave it for the middle army to deal with. In short, charge into the enemy's forces as fast as you can and turn them upside down. Lung Feng's 4th Division, the 1st Cavalry Division, the Mongol Alliance Army, and Liao Dong's 1st Division, Daikua, will be in the middle army with me. While supporting the vanguard, you will be in charge of attacking the enemy's cities. The 2nd Outsider Army will be in charge of logistics and backup, and be ready to join the battle at any moment. Orders after orders came out of his mouth. All the generals who were called out stood up straight and answered. The entire meeting room was filled with a sense of nervousness and majesty before a huge battle. 3 Eastern Province. This was a huge province that had just been established half a year ago. It was responsible for protecting Liaodong, developing agriculture, and logistics. As the great general, Yi Ligong had a heavy responsibility. In just half a year, he had clashed with the Baiming army in the Liaodong region more than 10 times. He had suppressed them to the south of the logistics line and ensured that the 5-star army had enough supplies. As a surrendered general, Yi Ligong was entrusted with a heavy responsibility. After obtaining sufficient military and financial power, he also fully demonstrated his talent. After personally commanding several battles, he also established enough prestige in the army of the 3 eastern provinces. In the past 6 months, it was also the happiest 6 months in Yi Ligong's life. He could finally exert his strength without any restrictions. Watching the army become stronger day by day under his own integration, and seeing that the people had food to eat and clothes to wear this winter under Yang Chendong's policy of not collecting agricultural taxes for 2 years, he felt infinite pride in his heart. Wasn't this the life he had always wanted, the life he had always wanted to see? He did not expect it to come true like this. In comparison, looking at the Baiming civilians living outside the 3 eastern province, they were still the same. They did not have enough food and clothes, and they were still suffering. At this moment, Yi Ligong only hoped that Bugnam of Gojoseon could quickly solve the problems in the Ili region and return to Liaodong to save more Han civilians. With such thoughts in his heart, Yi Ligong had been working hard. Together with Governor Lu Ji, they did their best to manage the 3 eastern province and increase their strength. It was the new year. After Yi Ligong paid a visit to Governor Lu Ji in the morning, he returned to his own residence and celebrated the arrival of the new year with the people in the Yi residence. He firmly believed that each year in the future would be better and stronger than the previous year. However, just as the entire residence and city was celebrating, an uninvited guest suddenly appeared outside the Yi residence. Under the lead of the unattractive butler, he came to Yi Ligong's study room. Chapter 1277. At this moment, Yi Ligong's face no longer had the happy smile he had during the new year. There was only a cold expression. Especially after the person was brought in front of him, he said with a frosty expression, "I really didn't expect that Tongji Dai would travel thousands of miles to come to our remote place during the new year. He really put a lot of thought into this." Standing across from Yi Ligong was the Baiming embroidered uniform guards commander, Dai Qing. Dai Qing and Yi Ligong were old acquaintances. In the past, Dai Qing was a small official in the embroidered uniform guard in the new Gandusi district. Later on, he went to the capital. However, he didn't expect that when he came back, he was already a lower third-rank official. Hearing Yi Ligong's words, Dai Qing's face was filled with displeasure. He was a member of the embroidered uniform guard. During the Great Ming Dynasty, regardless of whether it was the nobility or the ministers, or the commoners, their faces would change at the mention of his name. In the past, Yi Ligong was only an insignificant commander. Seeing him, not only was he not afraid, he even dared to mock him. This made Dai Qing's face very uncomfortable. Following this, he didn't wait for Dai Qing to invite him and found a place to sit. "You can leave first." Looking at the housekeeper standing outside the door, Yi Ligong lightly waved his hand. Although Dai Qing was an unwelcome guest and should have been taken down on the spot, since he had come, Yi Ligong was very curious about what he wanted to say. So what if he left him alive for a while? There were no outsiders in the room. Yi Ligong's face became very serious. "Speak, what business do you have?" Dai Qing didn't mind Yi Ligong's lack of respect. He had already thought about this when he came. Moreover, in the Great Ming Dynasty, the Taijin Guards and the Eastern Faction Guards were very majestic. In reality, they were looked down upon by many people on the righteous path. They could only survive in the darkness and were hated by everyone. However, despite knowing this, Dai Qing still had to come. This was an order from above. If he didn't come, there was only one path left, death. If he came, perhaps there would be a glimmer of hope. "General Yi, let's not beat around the bush. This time, I came on the orders of the emperor to persuade you to turn back." "Oh, that's right, I have a letter that eunuch Gao wrote for you." As he spoke, Dai Qing reached into his bosom and took out a well-wrapped letter before handing it over. The so-called Gao Gonggong was the supervising eunuch of the Baiming Imperial Horse Directorate, Gao Rang. He was also a eunuch with a high position and power. In terms of status, he was second only to Jin Ing. Yi Ligong naturally knew this person. In the past, he would think of ways to give some salary to these supervisor eunuchs during festivals. This was not to say that he wanted to surrender to the other party, but to prevent the other party from finding trouble with him. Who said that she had to do something just because she gave him a gift? It was already very fortunate that these eunuchs were not looking for trouble. Since the other party had written a letter, Yi Ligong opened it with the thought that there was no harm in reading it. He had even thought that he would definitely turn these letters in when he returned. At this time, his heart was completely focused on Xianxia. Seeing that the people had already seen the hope of a better life, he would not allow anyone to destroy or take back all of this. Yi Ligong held a firm belief in his heart, but after reading this letter, his expression changed again and again. At this time, he was no longer as full of confidence as before. This was because this letter recorded some of the matters of Song Quan's family. Song Quan had once been the commander of the new, Ergon capital region and had been Yi Ligong's immediate superior. It could be said that he had taken good care of Yi Ligong. When the 5-star army had arrived at the city walls, he had not hesitated to commit suicide to save Yi Ligong's life and give him a great merit. In Yi Ligong's heart, Song Quan was his blood brother. His blood brother's family was naturally his family, not to mention that he had promised Song Quan before he died. Not to mention that Yi Ligong did not have a family now. Even if he did, if someone threatened him like this, he would not be moved at all. In his heart, there was always a balance. But if it was Song Quan's family, it was very different. He was willing to die for this promise. From this letter, it could be seen that Song Quan's family had been threatened by Gao Rang, or even deeply. If he did not agree to the other party's request, he was afraid that the family would not have a good ending. With the usual style of the embroidered uniform guard, there was no need to say anything about not harming the family. Yi Ligong's expression changed again and again. At this moment, he was somewhat out of his wits. When Dai Qing saw this, a gloomy smile flashed across his face. In this world, everyone had a weakness, and the embroidered uniform guard were people who were good at finding this weakness. Now, he was even more certain that this mission should not be difficult to complete. At this moment, in an adjacent alley outside the Yi residence, the figure of the Yi residence's housekeeper appeared. After making a few turns, he arrived in front of a small courtyard and gently knocked on the door. Then, the door opened and the figure flashed in. Yi Ligong did not know where the housekeeper went, but at this moment he did not care at all. After carefully reading the letter 3 times, he suddenly raised his head and looked at Dai Qing with a fierce gaze. He said, "What do you want?" This was a negotiation. Dai Qing's face showed a happy expression. He clasped his hands and said, "General Yi, you are the pillar of our Baiming army. You must understand the principle of a fine bird choosing a tree to nest in. This time, Eunuch Gao wants you to know the way back and lead the army back to Baiming's embrace. As long as General Yi does this, the emperor will be very happy. At that time, a high position and a good salary will be just around the corner. Dai Qing pretended to congratulate Yi Ligang, as if Yi Ligang was about to soar to the top. But Yi Ligang did not dare to believe a word of this. What emperor's expectation? All of this should be Gao Rang's doing. Using the son of an old friend to threaten people, such a trick could only be done by the embroidered uniform guard and the East faction. But knowing this, how should he choose? If he agreed, he would violate his oath and life goal, and he would betray Yang Chendong's trust in him. If he did not agree, he would betray the dead Song Quan. It was a dilemma, and he could not make a decision. Dai Qing looked at Yi Ligang's hesitation and did not mean to urge him. He was a eunuch with a certain degree of cultural foundation and knew that more haste, less speed. This time, he came to put pressure on the other party and did not expect to force the other party to speak. This time, he mainly came to inform the other party. He believed that after some time, he should know what to choose. Okay, the letter has been delivered. I will come back in 3 days. At that time, I hope General Yi can think clearly and make the wisest decision. Goodbye. Dai Qing also knew that this was the territory of the 5-star army. It would be inconvenient for him to stay here for a long time. He did not wait for Yi Ligang to speak and turned to leave after saying this. Just like when he came, Dai Qing deliberately wore a cotton hat. It was a common thing to wear in the cold 3 northeastern provinces, but it could better cover his face. When he walked out of the Yi mansion, he intentionally looked left and right. When he did not find anything out of the ordinary, he walked away with large strides. To be able to become a member of the embroidered uniform guard, he had undergone a certain amount of harsh training. To be able to become a lower 3rd-rank official like the commander, Dai Qing's skills were not bad. However, what he didn't know was that there was always someone stronger. In terms of skills, the people of the 5-star Army's intelligence bureau were not much worse than him. Especially the people of the action team, their abilities were not weak. Just as Dai Qing thought that he had left the Yi residence without anyone noticing and was heading towards the place where he had landed, a commoner carrying firewood was following him from a distance. After following him for 3 streets and seeing him enter an inconspicuous courtyard, he quickly turned around and headed back the way he had come. Not long after, the firewood seller appeared in front of the Yi mansion's housekeeper and another young man. Manager, I've found the corner. It's a secluded courtyard on the South Street. Very good, immediately bring people to keep an eye on that place. The young man who was called the manager nodded in satisfaction. Then he said to the housekeeper beside him, you should go back. You've been out for a long time, don't make people suspicious. After the housekeeper agreed, he quickly pushed open the door and left. The manager's eyes flashed with a light. After standing there for a while, he turned around and walked into the depths of the courtyard. Yi Ligang probably didn't know that when Yang Xie gave him this mansion, including the housekeeper and servants, there were many spies. It was still the same saying, don't doubt the people you use, even if you suspect them, use them. Originally, Yi Ligang didn't have a family. His parents and brothers were no longer around. For such a person, how could he not take any precautions when he could use him? Not only was he prepared, but the Yang Xie Security Bureau's stronghold in the 3 eastern provinces was near the Yi mansion to prevent any accidents. Unexpectedly, there was actually someone who came to find Yi Ligang. Although the housekeeper didn't know the identity of the other party, the words Dai Tongji already exposed a lot of problems. At the very least, this person wasn't a Yang Xie person. From his official position, it was very likely that he was a Baiming official. The manager's surname was Ning and his name was Gang. As the highest-level existence of the Security Bureau in the 3 eastern provinces, his main purpose was to find out some military information about the Baiming army and to become enemies with the brocade gown guards. Yang Chendong had never been careless about the brocade gown guards. To be able to become such a notorious existence, whether it was in history or movies, was enough to prove their influence and destructive power. It was because of this that Yang Chendong had long ago entrusted the Wolf Fang Special Forces to send instructors to the Security Bureau and the CIA. A real intelligence officer should be proficient in both the pen and the sword. Especially as Xianxia's territory grew bigger and bigger, there were likely to be more and more tricks in the dark. He had to be prepared. Chapter 1278. Money and manpower were Yang Chendong's biggest advantages. Whether it was the Security Bureau or the CIA, they had developed strongly over the years, and many outstanding talents had emerged. Ning Gang was one of them. He graduated with excellent results in the graduation examination and stayed with Director Yang San for half a year. After his vision and thinking had been greatly improved, he was finally demoted and became the intelligence director of the Security Bureau in the 3 eastern provinces. Previously, he had sent people to obtain some military information about the Baiming army through various means. Once, he was even praised by the higher-ups. However, he had never fought with his old rival, the brocade-gowned guards. So, many of the things he learned could not be used. Now that they had finally appeared, Ning Gang was very excited. Ning Gang, who had studied systematically, knew that it was oftentimes like this that he had to remain calm. When he thought of Director Yang San's calm choices in the face of various situations, he forcibly suppressed the urge to arrest them. The founder of the Security Bureau was, without a doubt, Yang Chendong. He had performed many similar tasks in his life and was familiar with this aspect. He selected some selected training, improved it, and handed it over to Tiger's man. Later, Yang Chendong was promoted by the deputy director and learned a lot from Yang Chendong. It could be said that he had completely inherited the mantle. As one of the students that Yang San was very satisfied with, Ning Gang naturally would not be too bad. He knew that the brocade-gowned guards was a powerful organization. Once they appeared, they would not be alone. In order to complete the task, they often did not even form a team. Usually, they would have a backup plan. His task was to find out all the members of the brocade-gowned guards that had appeared. He absolutely could not leave a little bit of trouble behind. If they wanted to do this, they would have to rely on Dai Tongji. At this time, Dai Qing did not know that he was being watched. In the past, he had also come to the Liaodong region for missions and secretly dealt with some disobedient officials. There had never been any problems. Now, these people only had a change of master, but the place had not changed. What was there to be afraid of? Without the slightest precaution, Dai Qing only made a few necessary anti-tracking actions. After finding nothing unusual, he returned to his temporary residence and met the 6 brothers who stayed here. "Sir, you're back. Did everything go well?" Seeing Dai Qing return, a man about 25 or 26 years old with long eyebrows like willows and a jade-like body quickly came up to greet him. This person's surname was Yao and his given name was Shi. He was the person that Dai Qing valued the most. No matter where he went, Dai Qing would bring him along. However, very few people knew that although Dai Qing looked very masculine, he had different preferences from others. This Yao Shi was the person he liked the most. There were many things that he would not tell others, but he would never hide them from Yao Shi. Therefore, he was the only one among the 6 who knew the rough details of the mission. As soon as he saw Yao Shi, Dai Qing's heart skipped a beat. Since he was in a good mood, he naturally spoke more casually. "I've talked to him. There shouldn't be any problems. However, we still need to make another preparation. If he doesn't agree after 3 days, prepare to kidnap him. It doesn't matter if he's dead or alive. This is the consequence of betraying the Baiming. How about this, Shi? Go inform the other team and have them prepare to act at any time." No matter what, Dai Qing was still a commander in the embroidered uniform guard. There were many people with status who knew him. Although he had disguised himself, it would be best if he did not appear in public. It would save him a lot of trouble. This time, if it wasn't to gain Yi Ligong's trust, he would not have personally come. However, he would never have thought that he had already been exposed. In his opinion, Yi Ligong would definitely not report this matter to the 5-star army for the safety of Song Quan's family. Even if he wanted to report it, it would not be so fast. Therefore, he should be very safe right now. The other operation team had 20 people. They were all highly skilled in martial arts. Once they used force, it would not be a problem for them to kill their way into the Yi residence. However, only Dai Qing and Yao Shi knew about the existence of this small team. It was not convenient for him to appear, so he could only send his confidant. Be careful on the road. This is Bugnam of Gojoseon's territory. Although he did not think there would be any safety issues, Dai Qing still reminded Yao Shi. Yes. Yao Shi agreed with a smile. He then went into the central room and put on a thick coat, wrapping his entire body in it. Seeing that there were no more problems, he left the courtyard under Dai Qing's watchful gaze and headed straight for another settlement. Yao Shi's level was far worse than Dai Qing's. He was only chosen because of his good looks. In terms of professional level, he was too far behind. After he was discharged from the hospital, he only nervously looked around. When he did not see anything special, he went to the location of the other team. Behind him, at least 3 secret agents of the Security Bureau were alternately following him. The sky finally darkened. In the inconspicuous courtyard where Ning Gang lived, a large group of agents of the Security Bureau had already gathered. At this time, each of them had their chests puffed out and their eyes shone brightly as they waited for the final order. After an afternoon of investigation, the group of embroidered uniform guards, a total of 27 people in 2 locations, safely fell into Ning Gang's line of sight. After repeatedly confirming that the embroidered uniform guards did not have any backup plans, Ning Gang decided to make his move. He also wanted to know the purpose of the embroidered uniform guards. Although through ordinary observation, this Yi Ligang was still very trustworthy. However, if something were to happen, it would be better to capture him and personally ask him. Teams 1, 2, 3, and 3 are responsible for capturing people. Teams 4, 5, and 6 are responsible for internal security. In the event of an accident, help at any time. Teams 7, 8, and 9 are responsible for the outermost security. Team 10 is responsible for secretly watching. In the event of an accident, immediately contact the 5-star army stationed in the city and seal off the 4 cities. In short, not a single embroidered uniform guard is allowed to escape. Ning Gang looked at the 10 operation team captains standing in front of him with a trace of killing intent in his eyes as he spoke. A team of 10 people, a total of 100 operation team members. This was the armed force in Ning Gang's hands. Other than that, he also had an intelligence team and a tracking team under him. In the event of a major incident, he also had the authority to mobilize the nearby troops at any time. Ning Gang had mobilized all the operation team members just to capture 27 embroidered uniform guards. This was how careful Ning Gang was. He deeply remembered what Director Yang Chendong had said before. This was also what Bugnam of Gojoseon and Yang Chendong had taught them. As a qualified intelligence officer, succeeding 99 times was not something to be proud of. This was because as long as you failed once, all your previous efforts would be wasted. Therefore, every mission had to be completed with a 100% commitment. Even a lion would use all its strength to catch a rabbit. Each team received the mission and received the blueprints of the 2 courtyards from the intelligence team. After a thorough understanding and a reasonable plan of action, everyone set off at the designated time and went straight to the 2 targets. In the courtyard of the first target, Dai Qing was holding Yao Shi. The 2 hadn't started doing anything yet. They were resting on the side of the bed. Yao Shi tried his best to say nice things to please Dai Qing, but for some reason, the effect was not good today. His backer, who was also his direct superior, was always absent-minded. This was the fundamental quality of a special agent. They were born with an extremely strong sense of danger. For some reason, after dinner, Dai Qing always felt his heartbeat become unstable, as if something big was going to happen. But no matter how he thought about it, he couldn't figure it out. He looked down at Yao Shi, who was still smiling at him in his arms. Dai Qing asked in an absolutely gentle tone, "When you went out today, you didn't notice anything else, right?" "No, what else could there be? No one here will recognize me." Yao Shi shook his head and said innocently. Yao Shi had not joined the embroidered uniform guards for long, and his ancestral home was in the south. In Liaodong, no one knew him. He didn't even have an old friend. So there shouldn't be any problems. Could it be that he was thinking too much? How could Dai Qing know that the problem was him? Instead, he was the one who implicated Yao Shi? Dai Qing couldn't think of a reason, so he stopped thinking about it. Instead, when he looked at Yao Shi, his eyes revealed a fiery expression. Filthy words came out of his mouth. "Little darling, the night is long." Just when he was about to do something, his ears suddenly moved. He seemed to hear a muffled sound in the courtyard. Who's it? As expected of a middle-level cadre in the embroidered uniform guards, he instantly exclaimed. Following this shout, the door was suddenly kicked open from the outside. Then, two shadows pounced on him from the left and right. "Aya!" Yao Shi, who had already taken off his shirt, cried out in alarm when he saw this scene. Dai Qing, who was also half-naked, reacted immediately. He grabbed the pillow in his hand and threw it out with a whoosh. Taking advantage of the moment when the headrest was thrown away, his body leaped out like a spirit fox, rushing out of the room and landing in the courtyard. It was when he entered the courtyard that Dai Qing's expression froze. At this time, he noticed that there were 5 men in black standing in front of him. They were surrounding him in a semicircle. "Who are you people?" In his heart, he knew that he had encountered a thief. In front of these bandits who killed without batting an eye, his so-called embroidered uniform guard name might not be useful. So after saying this, he added, "If you are looking for money, I am willing to give you money. Since you are outside, please make things easy." Chapter 1279. Cut the crap. Capture him. I want him alive. The leader of the 5 people was Ning Gang. He was worried about the situation here, so he personally led the team here. At the same time, this was his first time dealing with the Imperial Secret Service, so he wanted to test the other party's strength. When the 4 team members beside him heard the supervisor's words, they rushed forward without another word. However, in order to capture him alive, they abandoned their weapons and rushed forward with their bare hands. What a good Dai Qing! Facing the 4 people rushing at him with a half-naked body, he was fearless. His fist was like the wind as he met them head-on. With a dull thud, the operation team member staggered back 3 steps, revealing an opening. With one punch, he forced an operation team member to retreat. However, Dai Qing's expression also froze. Although he did not use his full strength in that punch, he still used 70% of it. He originally thought that he would be able to send the person flying, but he only retreated 3 steps. It seemed that the other party did not come with good intentions and was not weak. In the blink of an eye, the other 3 team members rushed forward together. For a moment, punches and kicks rained down on Dai Qing's body like a storm. Dai Qing, who protected his head with both hands and his key parts, took several fierce punches. Taking advantage of the opponent's first wave of attacks, before the second wave of attacks came, his body suddenly rushed in one direction. With a mountain lean, he knocked one of the operation team members to the ground. Then, with a long leg sweep, he knocked another team member to the ground. After that, he extended his free hands and smashed towards the last team member. This series of reactions happened in the blink of an eye. The remaining operation team member kept retreating. His hands kept moving in front of him to protect himself, and at the same time, he wanted to dissipate the power of Dai Qing's attacks. After 3 consecutive punches, he still did not knock the opponent down. Dai Qing was anxious. He did not know how many tricks the opponent had. He could not delay and had to end the battle quickly. At that moment, he stopped abruptly. Then, he raised his right leg and kicked the side of the team member's head with great force. Fortunately, the team member was somewhat prepared and protected his head. However, the powerful force still made him retreat continuously. Bang! Dai Qing, who had just finished his kick and was about to rush out, was suddenly knocked down to the ground by a long leg sweep. It was Ning Gang, who had not made a move until now, who had finally made his move. This kick was extremely fast. Dai Qing was unable to react in time and suffered a loss. However, his skills were extraordinary after all, and he had experienced countless life and death battles. Therefore, the moment he fell to the ground, he took the opportunity to roll like a donkey, then flipped over and quickly stood up. Dai Qing had just steadied himself when another fist came crashing down. Out of instinct, Dai Qing countered with a punch. Then, with a muffled bang, a great pain came from his fist. He couldn't help but take 4 steps back before he could stand firm. Needless to say, the one who attacked was Ning Gang. Since his first attack had failed, he would throw another punch. What he wanted was to seize the absolute initiative. After launching a kick and a punch, Ning Gang had already entered the zone. His body was as light as a swallow as he leaped up and launched a chain of 3 kicks at Dai Qing, who was still retreating. Tong tong tong, there were several fierce attacks. When Dai Qing felt that both his arms were in so much pain that he couldn't even lift them up, he suddenly felt a pain in his legs. It was still a long leg sweeping attack. Once again he was hit and fell to the ground. After falling to the ground twice in a row, Dai Qing's body was no longer as nimble as before. It was impossible for him to stand up in a short time. Taking advantage of this time, the 4 action team members who were repelled by him before pounced on Dai Qing, who was on the ground, like fierce tigers. Soon, his limbs were pressed firmly and he could no longer move. At this time, the other 2 action team members in the bedroom had already escorted Yao Shi, who was also naked, out. Looking at the performance of the 2 men, Ning Gang, who was still calm and agile just now, couldn't help but stare blankly. Then he shook his head. At this moment, he already knew what had happened. He couldn't help but feel nauseous. The arrest operation was very smooth. Under the surprise attack, the action team of the Security Bureau suddenly made a move and ended everything in just 2 hours. 13 of the 27 embroidered uniform guards were killed on the spot, 7 were seriously injured, and the other 7 were captured. In the dungeon of the Security Bureau's branch in the 3 eastern provinces, the interrogation had already begun. As the protagonist, Dai Qing was locked up alone in a room. At this time, his eyes were dull. Even now, he still couldn't figure out what the problem was. He didn't suspect Yi Ligang. He had already done his research. He was a man of honor and would never betray him and put Song Quan's family in danger. About an hour passed, and finally, there was a sound outside the prison door. Ning Gang and the others appeared in front of him. The 5 captured embroidered uniform guards were tortured, and all of them spoke. However, they didn't know what this person wanted to do. They only knew that it was to complete a secret mission. As for the specific details, they didn't know at all. Therefore, even though they wanted to speak and even talked about many secrets of the embroidered uniform guards, none of them were related to this operation. The final mission still fell on Dai Qing's head. As soon as Ning Gang appeared, Dai Qing raised his head and looked at him with the help of the candlelight. Then, he let out a snort and turned his head to the side. He knew very well that the people outside didn't know about the mission at all. Even Yao Shi had only informed the other party that they were going to take action. They only knew about the general mission and it didn't matter. Seeing Dai Qing's uncooperative behavior, Ning Gang wasn't anxious. On the contrary, he looked at him with interest. Then, he chuckled and said, "You don't want to talk, right? It's fine. I hope you can hold on. If you want to kill me, then kill me. I'll still be a good man after 18 years. At this moment, Dai Qing showed a fearless expression. Still a good man after 18 years? Not bad. But I don't know if you can hold on until then to bring him here. Ning Gang wasn't surprised. If the other party spoke after a simple inquiry, it could only mean that there was no one else in the embroidered uniform guards that could be used. After this shout, the bare-chested Yao Shi was quickly brought over. Then he was tied to a wooden pillar at the side. When this scene fell into Dai Qing's eyes, a trace of nervousness flashed across his face. And all of this was seen by Ning Gang. This was his trump card. He had already guessed before. Then he found out from the mouths of the other embroidered uniform guards that Dai Qing and Yao Shi were indeed doing something shameful. He wasn't afraid of the enemy being stubborn. He was only afraid that he couldn't find the enemy's weakness. As long as he found it, it would be time to pry open the enemy's mouth. Yao Shi was tied to the wooden frame. Ning Gang casually sat on a chair. First, he inadvertently glanced at Dai Qing and found that he was looking at Yao Shi with red eyes. Immediately, the corner of his mouth curled up and said, What are you waiting for? Let's start the torture. No. Two consecutive voices came from different mouths. It was Dai Qing and Yao Shi. Yao Shi was afraid, and Dai Qing was worried. Ning Gang wasn't surprised at all by these two people's reactions. He looked at Yao Shi again and said, "You're so delicate. We really don't want to torture you, but there's no other way. Someone has to speak. Why are you here? Otherwise, I won't be able to report back. Okay, let's not talk nonsense. Let's start the torture." Yao Shi, who was afraid of being tortured, immediately shouted loudly. Then he looked at Dai Qing and said, "Save me, save me. Didn't you say that you love me very much and are willing to give up everything for me?" If these words were said by a woman to a man, everyone would be able to accept it. After all, love between a man and a woman was a very normal thing. But when it came from a man talking to another man, no matter how handsome the man was, it made people feel a sense of disgust. At this moment, not to mention Ning Gang, even the other people participating in the interrogation hurriedly looked to the side. Obviously, they couldn't accept the reality in front of them. However, at this moment, Dai Qing didn't feel uncomfortable at all. On the contrary, he looked at Yao Shi affectionately with a look of struggle in his eyes. Next, Yao Shi shouted loudly, but Dai Qing didn't speak. He just looked conflicted and reluctant. It's time to add fuel to the fire. Ning Gang thought so in his heart. Then he said to the torture staff, "What are you waiting for? Since there are people who don't care, let's start the torture." A burly man agreed. Then he raised his right hand and twisted the whip in his hand. When he saw that the whip was about to fall, Dai Qing, who had been silent, couldn't help but shout, "Don't hit, I'll talk, hit the snake where it hurts." However, no one would have thought that Dai Qing's weakness was actually a man. For the sake of Yao Shi, he finally lowered his head. Ning Gang also stood up from his chair and said with satisfaction, "That's right. Well, tell me about your mission here." Dai Qing, who had been wronged, naturally cooperated fully. He told the whole story of how he received the order from eunuch Gao Rang to persuade Yi Ligang to rebel. It turned out that what happened in Liaodu had made the acting emperor very angry. If they had only lost to the 5-star army in the war, it wouldn't be a big deal. After all, who would only win and not lose in a war? However, he was angry about the performance of the officials, especially the generals, who were originally from New Ergon. Didn't they say that martial artists valued righteousness and scholars despised each other? But why did so many generals and commanders choose to surrender? He couldn't figure it out. At the same time, he decided to punish these people. Otherwise, wouldn't everyone follow suit in the future? Chapter 1280. Not long after Xianxia's tens of thousands of soldiers surrendered to the 5-star army, Dai Zong became even more determined. Under the instigation of eunuch Jining, this task fell into the hands of the head of the Imperial Horse Directorate, Gao Rang. Don't think that the group of eunuchs would be united. On the contrary, they fought fiercely more than anyone else. Perhaps it was because they were missing some parts of their bodies, but they were especially fierce when they fought. They would often kill their opponents as soon as they made a move. After Gao Rang received this task, he immediately began to plan everything. He needed to report to the emperor. Otherwise, if the emperor questioned him, Jin Ing would add fuel to the fire and he would not have a good ending. Just like that, after a series of investigations, the final target was Yi Ligang, who valued friendship the most. Although he wanted to make a move on Xianxia, who had more power, he had already taken away his family and his brother's family. Even the eunuch who was in charge of supervising them was taken away. Helpless, he could only find General Yi Ligang, who was second only to them. Although Yi Ligang did not have a family and his parents were no longer alive, based on the results of Gao Rang's investigation, he valued friendship. He especially treated his superior, Song Quan, like his own brother. Although Song Quan was dead, his family was in Baiming's capital, so there was no need to fear that he would not submit. Thus, Gao Rang had people take Song Quan's family into custody and then sent one of his trusted aides, Dai Qing, to complete the task. In his view, with hostages in hand, Yi Ligang would not dare to act rashly. As long as he could convince him to take back the military power of the 3 eastern provinces, Baiming would not only be able to take back the area north of Liaodong, but also cut off the supply route of the 5-star army. No matter how he looked at it, this was a great achievement. Dai Qing came. He also believed that with hostages in hand, Yi Ligang would not dare to act rashly. Thus, he also brought his favorite, Yao Shi, along with him. He never thought that he would have a bad start and attract the attention of the security bureau of the 5-star army. Now that he had fallen into their hands, he did not know whether he would live or die. After confessing everything, Dai Qing was like a defeated rooster. He looked at Ning Gang and said, "I've said what I should say. You can kill me, but please let Yao Shi go. Thank you." Ning Gang had a guess about what had happened, and now it seemed that he was right. However, he did not intend to let Dai Qing go, nor did he intend to kill him. If the matter was not resolved, Gao Rang would inevitably send other brocade guards to solve his problem. This time, it was due to the other party's carelessness that he was easily discovered. But what about the next time? What about the next time? He couldn't be so lucky every time, right? In order to solve this problem once and for all, there was only one way, which was to rescue Song Quan's family and send them to General Yi Ligang. This was the perfect ending. In order to accomplish all of this, it ultimately fell on Dai Qing's shoulders. In the capital of Baiming, the security bureau also had secret armed forces, and there were spies in some key departments. It was not difficult to rescue a few people, but the difficult part was where Song Quan's family was. In the huge capital, there were more than 1 million people. If there were no clues, it would be quite difficult to find them. If they were not careful, they might alert the enemy and mess things up. In order to find out where the people were being held, they could only start from Dai Qing. Dai Tongji, do you know where Song Quan's family is being held? Ning Gang, who wanted to find out all of this, asked. Don't call me Tongji. Just call me by my name. I'm now a prisoner. As for where they are being held, I don't know. I just received a mission to inform General Yi Ligang. Dai Qing shook his head and said all of this as expected. Ning Gang did not suspect that Dai Qing was lying. After all, he had said what he should, and there was nothing to hide. In other words, if he wanted to know where Song Quan's family was being held, he had to think of another way. However, Ning Gang did not want to go through so much trouble. He stared at Dai Qing and said, "If I let you go, do you have the confidence to find where Song Quan's family is being held when you return to the capital?" Hearing that he could be released, Dai Qing's heart skipped a beat. However, when he thought about how he had answered so many questions, even if he escaped now, eunuch Gao Rang and the embroidered uniform guards would not spare him. Their family rules were very strict. I don't have confidence. The capital is too big. Finding a few people, especially a few people who are deliberately hiding, is harder than ascending to the heavens. Then what if this is General Ye's intention? Ning Gang continued to ask. General Ye's intention? Dai Qing said with some confusion. Yes, it's General Ye's intention. If General Yi wants to see Song Quan's family first to make sure they are fine, then he will talk to you about surrendering. With such an excuse, do you have the confidence to see Song Quan's family? Ning Gang's brain worked quickly, and he quickly thought of a way to solve the problem and a possibility. Dai Qing thought about these words and imagined the possibilities, but in the end he shook his head and said, I'm afraid it's still very difficult. I may be able to see one person, but I won't see everyone. Moreover, eunuch Gao is suspicious by nature. He won't let me see the Song family's hiding place casually. Speaking of which, I'm just one of his trusted aides, not his confidant. Dai Qing's meaning was very obvious. That was, Gao Rang still couldn't fully trust him. He wouldn't reveal all his cards in such a matter. Ning Gang did not expect this, but it was normal. If he really was a trusted subordinate, he wouldn't have sent Dai Qing to handle such a dangerous matter. After thinking it through, he was not discouraged. Instead, he continued to ask, based on your understanding of Gao Rang, which confidant might know where Song Quan's family is being held? After thinking for a while, Dai Qing listed 3 names and said, "The 3 of them are eunuch Gao's absolute confidants. He can't do this kind of thing himself. He will only give it to one of them. As for who it will be, I can't say for sure." That's enough. Hearing that he could narrow down the target to 3 people, Ningang's face lit up. Originally, Yang Chendong had asked about the placement of Song Quan's family. However, Baiming's capital was not within Yang Xie's sphere of influence. It was not possible to find out among millions of people with great fanfare, so this matter had been suppressed. But now that there was a clue, Ninggang would not give up. As long as he kept a close eye on these 3 people, he would not have to worry about not being able to find them. The only way to solve this problem was to bring all of Song Quan's family members to Yi Ligang's side. A rough plan quickly formed in Ningang's mind. When he looked at Dai Qing, he said bluntly, "Dai Qing, your chance to perform a meritorious deed has come. As long as you follow my arrangements, I will not only guarantee your safety when you return to the capital, but you will also receive a reward when you complete the mission. When the time comes, you and Yao Shi can go wherever you want. The world is vast, but all is imperial land." Hearing this, Dai Qing shook his head. He thought that this was completely bewitching words. But before he could refuse, Ninggang interrupted. "Wrong. In the world, Bugnam of Gojoseon's territory is not smaller than Baiming's. In fact, it is even larger than Baiming's territory. As long as you complete this mission, I can immediately give you and Yao Shi an identity card that belongs to Yang Xie. When the time comes, as long as you are in Yang Xie's territory, you can go wherever you want. At that time, you can live a carefree and unfettered life with a concealed identity. Wouldn't that be better? Of course, if you are still willing to work for Bugnam of Gojoseon, I am also willing to recommend you." Dai Qing, who originally did not have much hope and only wanted to use everything he had in exchange for Yao Shi's safety, suddenly trembled when he heard these words. That's right. Right now, the world was not just Baiming's territory. There was also Nanming and Yang Xie. The territory that Yang Xie had conquered over the years was simply unimaginable. There were so many places that he could choose to live in. When the time came, no matter how powerful the embroidered uniform guard was, it would not be easy for them to find him. As for working for Yang Xie, Dai Qing did not have such thoughts. Ever since the day he joined the embroidered uniform guard, he thought that he would never be able to leave. Over the years, he had killed countless people and was tired of this kind of life. Now that he had a new beginning, how could he return to this kind of life? Okay, I only hope that after this matter is completed, you can let me and Yao Shi leave and let us go to a new place to start anew. Dai Qing did not dare to hope for a reward. As long as he could keep his life, he was already very satisfied. Although he did not manage to persuade Dai Qing to join the security bureau, Ninggang was not disappointed. As Yang Xie grew stronger and his territory became wider and wider, there would be plenty of talents in the future. At that time, it would not be you who begged others to join, but others who begged you to join. Finally, Dai Qing was persuaded. But for the sake of safety, Yao Shi did not leave with him this time. Only he was allowed to leave the Jianzhou left guard. Later, after the secret agents of the security bureau in Baiming and Jingming received the telegram, they kept an eye on Gao Rang's 3 confidants and made preparations. In the end, they found all of Song Quan's family members. What happened next was much simpler. The people were suddenly taken away by the security bureau. Then they left the capital through a secret channel and went to Shur City. In April next year, they arrived at the Jianzhou left guard. When they suddenly appeared in the Yi mansion, Yi Ligang was completely shocked. Originally, he had been waiting for Dai Qing to show up again. He had already thought that as long as Dai Qing dared to appear again, he would take him down and send him to the governor, Lu Ji, to prove his loyalty to Bugnam of Gojoseon and the 5-star army. Next, he would commit suicide to thank Song Quan for taking care of him. But he did not expect that after waiting for so long he would get such a result. Chapter 1281. The person was sent over, and Yi Ligang had to be interrogated according to the law. After all, he didn't report Dai Qing's appearance to Governor Lu Ji and the relevant departments. Who knew what he was thinking? However, after the investigation, Yi Ligang's bodyguards found out that the general had ordered that the moment Baiming's brocade guard appeared, it would be time to arrest them. This proved his loyalty. After reporting to Yang Chendong, Yi Ligang was released without charge and returned to his position as the general of the eastern 3 provinces. As for Dai Qing, he completed his mission very well and brought over a member of the Song family. Ning Gang also fulfilled his promise. Not only did he release Yao Shi, but he also gave them identification documents that could be used in Yang Xie's territory. He also gave them 10,000 taels of silver for their living expenses. This was enough for them to live a carefree life. Dai Qing was so touched that he knelt down to thank him. He also said that he would tell his brothers about what had happened to him through various channels. In the brocade guard, everyone knew that as long as they came, they would be part of the brocade guard in life and in death. It was impossible for them to leave. However, with him as an example, those who wanted to leave could first come to Bugnam of Gojoseon's territory and then leave. This was equivalent to giving the brocade guard, especially those who were no longer part of the brocade guard, a new way out. Because of this, who knew how many brocade guard left and how many secrets they took with them? Some of these people directly joined the security bureau to work for Yang Chendong, while others joined the army and started anew. There were also some who went to other places to become farmers or merchants. However, this matter had a great impact on the brocade guard. Not only did it not succeed, but it also caused their own troops to be disloyal. Gao Rang was often punished by the acting guardian emperor. This matter was enough to change the entire brocade guard, but it wasn't important in front of Yang Chendong. It was already the 3rd month, and the snow had begun to melt. Although the weather was still fluctuating, and occasionally there would be light snow or sleet, it was no longer a hindrance to the road. Yang Chendong was also going to lead the 5-star army to attack and occupy the Yi Lili area. Over the past few months, hundreds of grain piles had been built in Turpan. They were all filled with rations to ensure that the army had enough for war. Many of the warehouses in the palace were also filled with boxes of gold, silver, and paper money. It had been 2 years since the banknotes were issued. This paper called Han banknote had a very obvious golden dragon printed on it, making it unforgettable. In Yang Xie's sphere of influence, these silver coins had gradually replaced gold ingots, silver ingots, and copper coins. After all, these things would be worn out if used frequently, but Han coins would not. As long as there was no intentional damage or tearing, it would not be wasted. Especially when there were different denominations in the banknotes. The small ones were 1 fun, 2 fun, and 5 fun, while the large ones were 100, 50, and 20 yuan. They were light and easy to carry, and were much more convenient than silver. With the Yang family bank as a guarantor, one could bring Han coins to any bank to exchange for gold and silver. At the same time, one could exchange gold and silver for Han coins. It was extremely convenient. If it was a large transaction, the Yang family bank could also release 100,000 yuan worth of banknotes. In this way, it was convenient for the commoners, and at the same time, it gradually replaced gold, silver, and copper coins, relieving the pressure on Yang Xie's finances. Even though Yang Xie was using war to support war, due to the continuous war, the pressure on his finances was still huge. If it wasn't for the fact that there were many new products that were exported, earning large amounts of money, he would not have been able to support himself until now. Furthermore, the circulation of Han banknotes had reduced the risks that might arise. Currently, all the banks in the Yang family were filled with gold and silver, greatly increasing the commoners' confidence in Han coins. With money and rations, this war was much easier to fight. Furthermore, Yang Chendong had the strongest weapons in the world, as well as the most resolute army. It was only a matter of time before they swept through all 4 directions. Just like now, the 5-star army seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. They were just waiting for Wu Nanking's order to launch a large-scale attack, besieging the city and capturing the stronghold to gain military merits. In comparison, the Ili Belly, Turpan, and Yarkiang tribes were having a much harder time. The commoners knew that war was coming, and no one knew what would happen. In a short period of time, the price of food soared, especially the price of food, which the commoners relied on for survival. In the past, 1 tael of silver could buy 2 dan of rice, and 1 dan was 94.4 kilograms. 1 tael of silver could buy 188.8 kilograms of rice. But now, 1 tael of silver could only buy 10 kilograms of rice. The price of food remained high, and at the beginning of spring, there were already signs of people starving to death. The flow of people fleeing also increased. In this regard, the kings of the 3 kingdoms could only watch, because they didn't know how long this war would last. They absolutely couldn't take out the food in their storehouses. Otherwise, how could the army win the war without food? What was worse was that the Kazakh and Aries dynasties' armies were about to enter. According to the previous agreement, the 3 kingdoms would be responsible for their food supplies. For a moment, the 3 kings were worried sick. The commoners were so hungry that they could not even eat, nor could they afford to buy food. Where would they find the strength to grow food? This was like a vicious cycle. Before the war even started, there were already internal problems, and the economic order was seriously threatened. It was said that war was a matter of fighting for money. Before the war even started, the 5-star army had already won. When the news of the 3 kingdoms reached the ears of Yang Chendong in Turpan, he keenly felt that this was a great opportunity. He immediately sent a telegram to the logistics headquarters, Yangtze, and asked him to gather more food and send it to Turpan. At the same time, he ordered the gates to be opened to receive the refugees from all directions. He also said that if the commoners had money, they could use the previous price to buy food. If they did not have money, as long as they came here, they would not be allowed to starve to death. If they were willing to move to other places, they would be given a pass. After gathering enough people, they could be sent to the rear and be given food, money, and land. With this move, the south and west gates of Turpan were quickly filled with commoners from all over. They were all people living at the bottom of the food chain and did not have much savings. When the harvest was good, they could eat more, but when the harvest was bad, their food would be worse. People like these only wanted to survive. As for beliefs and dignity, who would care if they could not even eat? The sudden situation also caught Yang Chendong off guard. Originally, he thought that even if he opened the city gate and spread the food, he might not be able to recruit many people. However, when he saw the number of people increasing by thousands or even tens of thousands every day, and this trend was getting stronger and stronger, he couldn't help but smile bitterly and say, "Immediately transfer 2 divisions from the new Second Army to escort the food and be responsible for the safety of the people along the way. Quickly send these people to the rear." This sudden development caught Yang Chendong off guard, but the military operations that were supposed to be carried out did not stop. For example, the new army, the new 5th Army, and the 1st Army of the foreign races still set off on time. Before the 3 commanders left the city, Yang Chendong held a short meeting and gave them a clear request. Their task was not to occupy as many cities as possible, but to attack the enemy's military strength as much as possible. Don't even think about occupying the cities. That's not something you should do. Unless there's a shortage of food, you can open the warehouses to get food. At other times, you can even abandon the captives and military equipment. In short, there's only one thing: kill the enemy. The more you kill, the better. After the 3 commanders completely understood Yang Chendong's meaning, they immediately expressed that they would kill as many enemies as possible to pave the way for the Central Army. The 3 commanders quickly left after giving a standard military salute to Yang Chendong, and then more than 100,000 troops poured out of the city. Naturally, the people of the 3 kingdoms were worried when they heard the news, especially King Hardenbarter. After hearing the news, his face was full of worry, and there was no light in it. Unlike the other 2 kingdoms, King Hardenbarter lost his capital and fled all the way until he lost his strength. But because of the bumpy road, coupled with the lack of strength in the front line, and the repeated defeats, when the news came, the imprisoned King Shiza fell ill and finally died 10 days ago. Before King Shiza died, he scolded his son Hardenbarter for being unfilial, which made him very angry. What he did was for the good of Turpan, but he didn't expect the 5-star army to be so strong. They didn't retreat in the face of the 5-kingdom alliance, and they even won consecutive battles. In the end, the famous Yes Hen had no choice but to flee. Now that they were finally enlightened, and it was time for war, the five-star army's first target seemed to be him. There was nothing he could do about it, who told Kalibi to be the closest to Turpan. After knowing that the five-star army first sent out more than 100,000 troops, and that one of the new army's targets was Kalibi, Hardenbarter called General Daichin to discuss the defense. The Kazakh and Aries dynasty's armies haven't arrived yet, and Yes Hen and Erqiang have a large area to defend. What should we do now? After calling Daichin, Hardenbarter immediately asked for a plan, and at the same time, he showed an expectant expression. If it was before, he wouldn't have to worry about this at all, and would just wait for the other party to report. But after a few battles, Turpan didn't win a single time, and even General Daichin lost a battle. As a general who lost his capital, Hardenbarter didn't have much confidence in them. Chapter 1282. Now that Tulyafin had suffered consecutive defeats, their military strength was not as good as before. Although they recruited another 50,000 soldiers, their military strength had reached 180,000, but there were too many places to defend. Facing the five-star army, they were unable to do anything. More importantly, the civilians of Tulyafin were too close to Tulyafin city. Naturally, they were the majority of the civilians that escaped. Not only that, there were also a lot of retired soldiers that escaped. They mixed in with the civilians and entered Tulyafin city. Don't think that they mixed in just to find the base of the five-star army. They really did surrender. Their families didn't have food to eat, their parents were old, their children were young, their wives were weak. They all needed the head of the family as a man to take care of them. These people chose to stand out to protect their families and join the five-star army with their families. People like these who brought their families with them wouldn't go against the five-star army, much less cause any trouble. Moreover, this situation was becoming more and more intense. The battle had yet to begin, but the army had already lost close to 5,000 soldiers. One could imagine, with their current state, how could they fight with the five-star army? How could they fight with the enemy? They didn't have enough soldiers and their battle strength was even lower. Even the cleverest housewife couldn't cook without rice. At this moment, General Daichin didn't know how to deal with this. At this moment, he really wanted to ask the king to open the granary and release the grain. However, he knew that if he really did that, not only would the civilians of Tulyafin, even the civilians of Ili and Yirkiang would come. It would also attract some unscrupulous merchants who would hoard grain at a high price. If that happened, then it would be a huge problem. Daichin thought for a long time but couldn't think of a solution. Facing the king's question, he could only lower his head and remain silent. Hardenbartle waited for a long while and still didn't get any reply. He couldn't help but ask, "General Daichin, I'm asking you something. Can you hear me?" "Yes, Your Majesty, I hear you. The five-star army is coming at us ferociously. Our reinforcements won't be able to reach here in a short amount of time. The only thing we can do now is to place our main forces outside the city and defend first. Using our advantage in numbers and terrain, we can still fight." Helpless, Daichin could only suggest a defensive strategy. He knew that if they kept defending, they would definitely lose. However, if they took the initiative to fight, they might be surrounded and split up. If that really happened, Turpan would have no trump cards left. Even if they could chase away the five-star army one day, they wouldn't have the strength to bargain with their allies. Hardenbarter quickly understood what Daichin meant. He couldn't help but frown. "You mean that we should let the five-star army walk past our city and wreak havoc everywhere? But do you know that if we do that, the entire Turpan will be engulfed in the flames of war, and we will have no way out? Once the city is lost, there will be no place for us to stay." Daichin obviously understood this logic, but at this moment, he really didn't have any better ideas. If they split up their forces to fight, they would probably lose even faster. As for whether or not this would cause them to lose the nearby cities and large amounts of land, it wasn't a problem that he needed to consider right now. Let's solve this problem first. "Your Majesty, I know your worries, but as long as Your Majesty is still here, the army is still here, and the lost land can be taken back. Furthermore, from what I see, if we gather our forces outside the city, the 5-star army might turn around and leave. After all, their numbers aren't as good as ours, so attacking the city won't benefit them. That way, as long as they leave, they might enter the lands of other allies. If that happens, some people won't be able to stand by and do nothing. Dai Qin had done a serious analysis before. Right now, there were 150,000 soldiers gathered outside the city, and their numbers were above the 5-star armies. If they attacked this place, both sides would suffer losses, and this wasn't the result that the 5-star army wanted. It was very likely that they would give up on this place and go to other places, such as Yilabali and Yarqiang. In that case, the two allied countries would not be able to sit on the sidelines even if they wanted to. Once they joined in, the pressure on Tulyafan would be greatly reduced. When Hardenbarter heard these words, he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. He finally understood his general's thoughts. This was also what he wanted. A month ago, before the ice and snow had melted, he had contacted the kings of Yilabali and Yarqiang, hoping that they would send reinforcements. This was because from various signs, it was very likely that the 5-star army's first target would be his Turpan kingdom. What he meant was that he didn't receive any response from them, as if they didn't hear his suggestion at all. It was clear that the two countries wanted to see them fight the 5-star army first, and then find a chance to reap the benefits. This was the so-called alliance. Because of the existence of their own interests, it was impossible for them to truly be united. Once there was a conflict of interests, it was very likely that they would turn against each other. Since they weren't benevolent, then they shouldn't blame him for being unrighteous. Although Dai Qin's suggestion was to sacrifice a large portion of Turpan's cities, he would be able to preserve his own military strength and quickly drag the other two countries into the war to reduce the pressure on him. Why not? The most important question now was whether or not the 5-star army would attack Kalabali city. He asked Dai Qin this question again. Are you sure that the 5-star army will go around us? They should. Even though this was the result of many analyses, who could be sure about the changes on the battlefield? Dai Qin didn't dare to make any guarantees, so he added, Your Majesty, we can act like we are going to fight to the death and give the 5-star army some pressure. This way, they shouldn't attack us. Plus, if they really want to attack Kalabali city, then we can hold on for a while. When the time comes, we will have enough time to send Your Majesty away. Dai Qin's meaning was very clear. No matter what, Hardenbarter's life could be saved. The only difference was that one result was that they would still be very strong, and the other result was that they would become a fugitive government that needed to rely on others. Okay, then let's give it a try. Immediately transfer the troops from the nearby cities and leave some money and food in the other cities to lure the 5-star army. Hardenbarter was very decisive. He actually didn't have any other choice. Either he immediately moved the army and gave up on Kalabali city. This way, even if he continued to escape, he would still be caught by the 5-star army. The losses wouldn't be small. Since that was the case, why not take a gamble? Dai Qin was very supportive of Hardenbarter's decision. When he heard that the king wanted the other cities to leave some food for the 5-star army, he couldn't help but reveal a look of admiration. With this bait, the chances of the 5-star army not attacking Kalabali city would increase. Under the king's orders, the troops from the nearby cities started to move towards Kalabali city. The Turpan kingdom only had 180,000 troops. Other than the 30,000 troops that were too scattered and couldn't gather due to the distance, the other 150,000 troops were all gathered in and outside Kalabali city. The military tents stretched for 10 miles, as if they were ready for a decisive battle once the 5-star army arrived. The ones that came from the middle were the new army. After General Su heard the information from the scouts, mainly from the intelligence department, he immediately made the decision to go around Kalabali city and attack the smaller cities with weaker defenses. Before they came, Yang Chendong had said that this time, they weren't going to take over the city or see who took over the most territory. What they wanted was to destroy the enemy's strength. Since that was the case, Su wouldn't be stupid enough to fight with the Turpan kingdom's main force. Plus, he really didn't care about a single Kalabali city. Su He's new army was the closest 5-star army to Kalabali city. Even he suddenly took a detour, so the 5-star army and the first army of the other races definitely wouldn't have any ideas about this place. When the news reached Hardenbarter and Daichin's ears, they couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief. King Hardenbarter's face finally showed a trace of relief as he said, "They really took a detour. Ha, let the other people have a headache from now on." "Yes, Your Majesty. Now that we've prepared ahead of time, we've stored large amounts of food in Kalabali city. It won't be a problem for us to defend for 2 to 3 years. By then, the battle will have ended. At that time, with your 150,000 troops, you might become the strongest force here." Daichin also let out a sigh of relief. As the general, the pressure on him was greater than anyone else. Luckily, the result was good. The 5-star army really did take a detour. Naturally, the burden on his body was also reduced by a bit. "You're saying that we still have a chance?" Hardenbarter, who originally thought that they were just hiding for a while, suddenly thought of a possibility. If the result was as Daichin predicted, when the 5-star army and his allies were almost done fighting, wouldn't he be able to reap the greatest benefits by leading his 150,000 troops? Thinking about how the Turpan kingdom could use this opportunity to increase their strength and truly unify this place, Hardenbarter couldn't help but laugh out loud. Wasn't this what he had been searching for? Perhaps it would truly be realized in his own hands. The new army went around Kalabali city and came to the hinterland of the Turpan kingdom. Then they attacked the city and took over the stronghold. No one could stop them. Some of the smaller cities had already opened their gates. The civilians had all run away. The Turpan army in the city had also all run away. It didn't take much effort at all. Chapter 1283. Regarding this, Commander Su He was extremely clear-headed. Even though he was facing an empty city, he still sent people to investigate and only moved in after confirming that it was safe. After a night of rest, he did not leave a single soldier in the city the next morning. Instead, he continued to lead the army forward. He remembered Yang Chendong's order, which was to destroy the enemy's strength and not to snatch control of the city. Along the way, the advance of the 1st Cavalry had been incredibly fast. Along the way, they had encountered some resistance from the Turfan army, but most of them were only a few hundred to 1,000 men. In front of the powerful 1st Cavalry, which numbered over 30,000, a single regiment could easily crush them in a single charge, wiping them out in just a few rounds. The new army progressed at an extremely fast pace, and good news was reported through the radio from time to time. In comparison, the progress of the new 5 armies could be said to be extremely fast. This was because they had originally chosen the east route. After setting off from Turpan, they also went around Chali and headed straight for Lopner. After taking down the nearby Ruochang County, their journey was extremely smooth. After some rest, they headed straight for Yirkiang's tribe. Next, it was time for them to show off their strength. In comparison, the 1st Army of the Outsiders was not so lucky. Under the lead of Commander Bai Shuang, they headed straight for Heavenly Mountain. Once they crossed the mountain, it would be equivalent to entering the hinterland of Ili and fighting with them. Luckily, they were prepared beforehand and had already scouted out their route. They found a relatively flat land, so crossing Heavenly Mountain was only a matter of time. Seeing that they were about to succeed and were about to face the city, Bai Shuang stopped the army and summoned the 4 division commanders to his tent. Inside the tent, Bai Shuang was wearing a purple cape. His young and handsome face had a maturity and steadiness that did not belong to his age. His clear eyes were staring at the sand table gathered by the intelligence department in front of him, thinking about something. "Commander!" Tu Hai and the other division commanders walked into the tent. After seeing Bai Shuang, they could not help but call out. Bai Shuang had replaced Su Kuda as the commander of the 1st Army of the Outsiders. For a regiment commander to be promoted to the position of commander, it was not an exaggeration to say that he was being promoted beyond his rank. But who asked his teacher to be Yang Chendong and Bugnam of Gojoseon? Even though Tu Hai and the others did not agree in their hearts, they still had to put on a very respectful appearance on the surface. Bai Shuang could more or less guess the thoughts of the 4 teachers. However, he didn't mind because he believed that he could conquer them with his own abilities. This was also the idea that his teacher, Yang Chendong, had given him. During the new year, when Bai Shuang went to visit Yang Chendong, she had received some pointers. Seniority in the army was naturally not something that could be ignored, but ability was more important. According to what Yang Chendong had said, as long as he displayed enough strength, Tu Hai and the others would not listen to him. Of course, if they really dared to disobey military orders, they could deal with them according to military rules. On this point, Yang Chendong had fully delegated the authority to Bai Shuang. With Yang Chendong's support behind him, what did Bai Shuang have to fear? He immediately promised that he would use practical actions to prove himself, and at the same time, he would not lose face for his teacher. Next, it was time to fight the first battle. How to make the 4 teachers truly submit to him, this battle was naturally very crucial. You've all come. Very good, take a look at the sand table in front of you. In half a day, we will be able to cross the heavenly mountain. Next, we will be entering the territory of Yili. The first town in front of us is the city department of Little Yule. The intelligence personnel have already sent news that there are 2,000 enemy soldiers here. Everyone, tell us, how should we attack and occupy that place? As Bai Shuang spoke, his gaze landed on Tu Hai and the other 3. Only 2,000 enemy soldiers. The 4 teachers couldn't help but reveal a proud expression. Clearly, this amount of soldiers was nothing in their eyes. Especially the leader of the 301st Division, Tu Hai. As a veteran of countless battles, Tu Hai had already killed countless enemies. Only 2,000 people were nothing in his eyes. Therefore, he was the first to speak. Military leader, it's only 2,000 enemies. Leave this matter to our division. I guarantee that we will be able to take it down within 2 hours. Tu Hai's words were extremely confident. In reality, he also had the strength to do so. The other teachers originally wanted to ask for a battle, but since Tu Hai had already stood out, it was naturally not good for them to snatch the credit. But even though they did not say anything from their expressions, it was obvious that they were disdainful of this battle. 2 hours? Not bad, it is indeed very fast. After Bai Shuang heard Tu Hai's words, he nodded in approval. He. Hearing that Bai Shuang seemed to agree, Tu Hai laughed and immediately saluted, Military leader, I will go and make preparations. At this time tomorrow, I will guarantee that the army will be able to spend the night in Little Yule City C. After speaking, Tu Hai was about to turn and leave the tent, but Bai Shuang's voice rang out, Teacher Tu, please wait. Tu Hai, who was stopped, revealed a displeased expression. However, before he could say anything, Bai Shuang and the others also asked, Division Master 2, how many men are you going to bring to attack? Can you guarantee that the other party will all stay in the city? Can you guarantee that none of the civilians or soldiers will escape? Can you guarantee that the news of our army appearing here will not be leaked? Can you guarantee that the stored food in the city will be safe for our army to use? Can you guarantee that? A series of questions were thrown out. In this short period of time, Tu Hai's expression changed again and again. He really wanted to say that once the battle started, who knew what would happen? How could he guarantee this? Who could guarantee this? After a series of questions were thrown out, Tu Hai did not know how to answer. However, Bai Shuang did not intend to stop asking. Instead, he continued to ask, I wonder if Teacher Tu can give an answer to these questions? This I can't guarantee. Tu Hai opened his mouth and closed it. After closing it and opening it again, he finally said these words. Okay, then which of the other teachers can do it? Bai Shuang then looked at Luan Xiaojiang and the others with a serious expression. No. Luan Xiaojiang, Sensei Naganabu, and Kong Biao all shook their heads one by one. It was easy to take down a city, but it was too difficult to not leak any news. At this moment, Tu Hai had already recovered from his previous question. At this moment, he finally said, Military leader, this is a bit too much. The situation of a battle is constantly changing. There is a saying in the art of war, there is no constant situation in war, and there is no constant situation in water. Who can guarantee that there will not be any problems? Wrong. Without waiting for Tu Hai to finish, Bai Shuang's stern gaze had already turned over. Changes in war do exist, but as long as the plan is good, it is very possible to control it within a certain range. Also, if you can't do it, it doesn't mean that others can't. I am willing to make a military pledge. I will personally go and control Little Yule City Head. I guarantee that there will not be any problems. However, if there are any accidents, I am willing to resign from my current position and return to being a regiment commander. When the military pledge was made, the 4 teachers were so shocked that their jaws dropped. For a moment, they were all stunned and did not know what to say. Logically speaking, with Bai Shuang's current status, he could let his subordinates do things for him. Unless it was a matter of life and death for the First Army, he would not personally take action. This was also Yang Chendong's intention. High-ranking officers could not take risks, because if something happened, the losses would be too great. However, Bai Shuang actually took the initiative to volunteer. However, to be able to become a teacher, none of them were idiots. They quickly thought it through. This time, Bai Shuang was forcing himself. He was establishing his authority. Military commander, you can't. After thinking it through, E-Division 303's Division Commander Sensei Naganabu took the initiative to stand up, wanting to say something. He was different from other people. Although he led the First Army, it was an army made up of people from different races, different regions, and even different faiths. However, to be able to become a high-ranking officer, other than him, everyone else was Han. This made his status somewhat awkward. When he did some things, he naturally could not be as unscrupulous as other people. Now that Bai Shuang was about to take the risk, of course he had to speak up to stop him and express his attitude. Sensei Naganabu was the first to speak up. Afterwards, E-Division 302's Division Commander Luan Xiaojiang and E-Division 304's Division Commander Kong Biao also spoke up to dissuade him. Whether they were sincere or just on the surface, at least they all knew that Bai Shuang's appointment as a military commander was personally ordered by Yang Chendong. That was set in stone and no one could stop him. And if something happened to Bai Shuang in front of them, as the commanders who held the military power, they would not be any better off. Out of the 4 commanders, 3 of them had expressed their opinions. Only Tu Hai stood there without saying anything. Instead, he looked at Bai Shuang up and down as if he had just met him. All right, this military commander has made up his mind. It cannot be changed. How about this? I will bring the direct military guards to Little Yule City Head. You all just need to stay at home and wait for the good news. Bai Shuang did not care if others looked at him or not. As the saying went, doing things beautifully was more convincing than saying more. Orders, everyone is to rest where they are. The direct military guards will follow me. Bai Shuang gave the order as a military commander. At this moment, even if the 4 commanders wanted to say something, it was all too late. In the 5-star army, the military commander's authority was still very great. Unless it involved a rebellion, the officers under him had to obey him unconditionally. Otherwise, they would be punished according to military law. Bai Shuang left. He left very decisively, and indeed only brought the 2,000 soldiers of the direct military guards with him. However, others did not know that he did not intend to use all of the 2,000 soldiers. He only needed to bring a battalion into the city. The other 4 battalions were only responsible for keeping watch outside, just in case. You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.